3, 4, 5.
Good evening. I'd like to call into session tonight's meeting of the Kennebunk Planning Board. Today is Monday, March 27, 2023. Due to some technical difficulties, we had some electronic presentations available made that we're going to be using tonight, but the technology's failed us, so we will make do without and move on from there. So bear with us. The first item on our agenda is a continued public hearing for LD 2003 review. What this procedure will be is that we'll hear from the town planner, who will go over an overview of the changes, mention any major changes from our last meeting. Board will ask any clarifying questions, and then we'll continue to hear public comments after that initial information. After we've heard the public comments, we will close the public hearing and may take action on the proposal tonight. So with that, I'll turn over to Brittany.
I don't know if you want to appoint Dan at this point,
Yeah,
or
sorry. In the absence of Ted Trainer and of Richard Smith, we will make Dan Kiley a voting member for tonight's meeting. Thank you. Brittany.
So as Chris mentioned, I did have a PowerPoint for tonight. Obviously, we're having some technical issues, so I'll read through this for the benefit of everybody that's here. LD 2003 is a new housing law that was passed by the state legislature to increase housing opportunities in Maine. There are 3 sections to the new law: affordable housing, accessory dwelling units, and residential areas with increased housing density. The timeline for this, the state signed it into law in April of 2022. It becomes effective July 1 of 2023. The planning board held a meeting January 30th. It was a preliminary meeting. In between this meeting and their meeting on February 27th, the state did release rulemaking, which did change some of the text that was proposed. We had the first iteration of the public hearing on March 13th, which is continued to this evening, which is where we're at right now. After this, if the board decides to send it on to the select board, there would be a first reading tomorrow night with an anticipated public hearing on April 11th. If they push that to town vote, that would be June 13th, and then the changes would go into effect on June 14th. Where we're at currently with affordable housing was added to the West Kennebunk Village Residential District, Downtown Business, Upper Square, Lower Village Business, West Kennebunk Village Mixed Use, Portland Road Mixed Use, and Coastal Res. Suburban Res. It was already a permitted use in the Village Residential and the York Street Mixed Use District with connection to water and sewer. That's another thing that's changed with LD 2003. You're not required to connect to public and water and sewer if you have an adequate septic system or engineered system. That's also a regulation for accessory dwelling units and multifamily housing. Also with affordable housing, they increased the density for projects with 50% or more to 2.5 times that is otherwise allowed with the base density for that zone. The board decided to keep their provision for projects that have under 50% of affordable housing units. And they did match the 2 off-street parking spaces for every 3 units for both projects above 50% and below 50%. That was one of the items that was changed from the last meeting. Accessory dwelling units. Accessory dwelling units are currently defined as accessory apartments in the zoning ordinance. This will be updated to accessory dwelling units. So that would be amended in Article 2 definitions and all the articles that permit accessory dwelling units. These were now allowed in the Resource Protection District, the Branch Brook Zone A, and the Coastal Residential. They're allowed with a minimum square footage of 190 square feet and a max of 1,000, or 40%, whichever's less, of the existing single-family home. A new item here would be the short-term rental that the board discussed at the last meeting, making it so that ADUs cannot be used as a short-term rental, and they proposed a definition, which I will get to later in the slides. For residential areas with housing to increase density, this affected the Branch Brook Zone A, B, rural conservation, and rural residential. They now have to allow 2 families on vacant lots. The other zoning districts already permitted multifamily lots and multifamily dwelling units, so there weren't very many changes to those zoning districts. So short-term rentals. The proposed definition for short-term rental would be the use, control, management, or operation of a legally existing dwelling unit in whole or in part for dwelling, sleeping, or lodging purposes for fewer than 15 consecutive days and for compensation directly or indirectly. This excludes motels, hotels, renting of rooms, and furnishing of boards and inns. Staff also researched surrounding communities to how they regulate short-term rentals with respect to the number of days. The following communities all use 30 days or less in their regulations: Cape Elizabeth, Kennebunkport, South Portland, Old Orchard Beach, Kittery, and Portland. So the board should discuss if they want to stay with 15 or go with 30. Also, Article 10, Section 15A6, which is the accessory dwelling units section, added the statement, accessory dwelling units shall not be used as a short-term rental. So that's all. The main big ticket item that was left outstanding from the last public hearing would be short-term rentals.
Thank you. Board members have any questions, clarifying questions on what Brittany went over? Bob?
I'm all set for right now.
Janice?
I don't think I have anything right now, Chris, thanks.
Dan?
No, I'm good, Chris, thank you.
At this point, we'll open up the public hearing. If any member in the public has questions or comments about the proposed changes, please come to the podium and state your name.
Hello, just one real quick question. Some of the things that you would define
Bill,
as...
could you just state your name again?
Oh, I'm sorry, Bill Ward, Kennebunk. A few of the places that have been historically used as short-term rentals down at the beach area may be defined as areas that may be ADUs. Are you doing anything about the grandfathered ones, or are you just doing a blanket policy on everything?
The way it's structured is a new term that we are defining, and so it will apply to anything that currently that the code defines as an accessory dwelling unit. It will have those restrictions. That's my understanding.
Yeah, let me help you out with a little
Thank
bit. In coastal residential, right now, accessory apartments are not allowed, where they would be allowed to be as ADUs, so there shouldn't be anywhere that's currently happening. So if it is not a legal use right now. So that would shift to a different category. So there would be no grandfathering of an illegal use.
That makes sense. What about things like small cottages that might exist? I think there was one down on Middle Beach that was there for a long time. I think it's gone now, but small cottages and that sort of thing.
Unless it is less than the 450 or 400 square foot in size, it's probably recognized as a dwelling unit. And under our ordinance, you don't have to occupy your residence if it's only a dwelling unit permanently or not. So if it's rental, seasonal, that's okay, as long as it isn't accessory to something else there. So if it's to stand alone by itself, it should be fine.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other members of the public have any questions or comments regarding the changes to the the zoning ordinance. Go ahead, Wayne. Okay.
Wayne Berry. Again, thank you for holding these meetings. I know it's time consuming. So a couple of things tonight. Just to clarify a couple of things, in the VR zone, if you look at the chart on the VR zone, and I can't tell you what page it is, but it's, if the minimum net lot area in the VR zone is 10,000 square feet, except if you have a two-family, and then it's 15,000 square feet per unit, still in the chart. How is that consistent with LD 2003?
So with LD 2003, you can't require more. So if you had a single family, it can be 20,000 per square foot. If you had a two-family, you could require 40, because that's still 20 per single family use. You couldn't say require 60,000 for a two-family. So with this, you're actually requiring less than what you would require for a single family use. You can't require more.
No, the chart says 10,000 square feet if you're on sewer or engineered system, correct?
For a single family, and it's saying for a two-family, it would,
I thought it was pretty clear that LD 2000 meant you can't discriminate between sewer and non-sewer. And you can't increase the amount of square foot required, regardless of which one it's on.
so 20,000 is a minimum for not being on sewer.
10,000 square feet is the minimum. You have it written down as 10,000 square feet.
So non-sewered at the state level, it's 20,000 as a minimum, which is why they left 20,000 in the table for not sewered, for a single family.
Non-sewered requires septic, let's call it septic, requires 20,000 square feet anyway. It's not about the net dwelling, it's not about the net lot area per dwelling unit.
Which is why they kept
It's
it at
about-
20. Because it's not sewered.
I'm not explaining it very well, I guess. The Town of Kennebunk's ordinance says 10,000 square feet per dwelling unit.
On sewer.
Right. That's the standard that you set. And then you went ahead and said, if it's a two-family, you need to have 30,000 square feet.
I believe that's only in the non-sewered.
Yeah, LD 2003 says it doesn't make any difference whether it's sewered or not.
The difference is,
another-
Wayne, if I explain it, try and make it simple. You either on public sewer, we're allowed an engineered sewer system. So if you meet that criteria, we're accepting that as meeting the sewer requirement, okay? For increasing the number on a lot.
Understood.
There's two tables.
And you know an engineered system is 2,000 gallons a day or more, right? I doubt there's going to be any two-family lots that are going to have 2,000 gallons a day flow. My point is, I think it seems inconsistent that you could allow 10,000 square feet per dwelling unit, but if you have a two-family, you need 30,000 square feet.
There's two tables there.
I know.
On the on the sewered side, it's the 10,000. On the non-sewered, it's the 20.
I think he's looking at the next line down with the two-family dwellings. I think that's the line, part of the table you're referring to.
What page are you on? Oh, I didn't put that out.
35 of what you sent to us.
Section 7, right? Is that what it is?
It's Article 8,
It's on
Section 7.
Page, 55 in your printout, but page 27 of the ordinance.
Page 35 in the handout.
I'm trying to find it in the Word document, which is not, I don't have that numbered the same way. What section is
Page
it?
54, 55,
Section 7, thank you.
on what you sent out.
Mine's page 35.
I'm in the Word document in case I have to change anything.
Changed the numbers, didn't you?
Yeah, I'm almost there.
No. You're in the Village Residential District, correct? Which is. So on Article 8, page 27 in the ordinance. Which in our
Yeah,
handouts.
so on the
35.
Seward, on the Seward side, it's 10,000 for a two-family. So it'd be 20,000 for a two-family. So you're not requiring more square footage than you would for a single-family per unit. So in the first column, I couldn't say 10,000 for a single and then 15,000 for a two-family for each unit. I couldn't require 30. The table's correct. I might not be explaining it great, but you can't require more square footage per dwelling unit. So the single family, you're requiring 10. The two-family, you're requiring 10 per each dwelling unit. It's 20,000, but you're not requiring more than 10,000 per side.
You are in the second column where it says 15,000 square feet per dwelling
In
unit.
the second column, it's actually less because the top is 20,000 for one and then 30 for two. So you're not requiring more than 40.
So you're actually requiring two different standards then, one for sewer and one for non-sewer.
So I guess we could change the 15,000 to 20,000 to be consistent with the Seward table.
I think you need to change it to 20,000. The 20,000 square feet has nothing to do with the size of the lot. Whether it's 20,000 square feet that's a minimum site law, or whether it's 20 million square feet, it still meets the minimum site law.
So I did have
But-
Natalie review this because you had asked about it previously, and she said we could leave it as is, or we could upgrade the 15,000 to 20,000 to be consistent on both sides of the table. But we could leave the 20,000 in because it's what's required.
Let me ask the board the question. Do you think the intent of the LD 2003 law was to make a differentiation between sewer and non-sewer?
Well, part of that 20,000 square foot was a state plumbing code
Correct. That's
So
for
if
the
you
lot size.
for the lot size. If you got two dwelling units, what we're getting at is providing, I agree with you in terms of an engineered system. The design of the septic system would have to meet the state plumbing code requirements if they're going to add an ADU. If you could add another unit in there to handle the capacity, that would technically be looking at 40,000, could be looking at 40,000 square feet. I mean, take it this way, if you had a 20,000 square foot lot to meet the state plumbing code and you put a four-family house in there, that's not gonna meet the requirements to be able to design a septic system.
Well, we don't know that. We assume so from our experience, right?
Yeah,
But we don't know that.
exactly.
My point is you are requiring more for a non-sewer dwelling unit than you are for a sewer dwelling unit.
That's right.
Anyway, the horse died, I guess. No point in beating it anymore. One of the other things that concerns me is, and I can't point to it exactly where it is, but you're limiting the ADU to owner-occupied in both cases, both the primary unit, one or the other.
One or the other, right?
So my question
It's
is,
both, I think.
how does that help increase housing?
Because it means the people that are staying in those units are living in town more than 6 months a year.
It also could be that you have an owner who doesn't live in town, who doesn't live in the unit, and wants to be able to rent both of them, long-term, because you're not allowing short-term rentals for the ADU.
If they want to own a multifamily project, then they would buy a multifamily lot. These are accessory dwelling units, so they're meant to be, again, an accessory. These are just,
Accessory to a dwelling unit.
yeah,
The
They're
state
not-
law doesn't say anything about owner-occupies. It just says if it allows a single-family dwelling unit, you're going to allow an ADU.
that's the way we've defined it, and we've, for quite some time, and that's how most other towns have
They've
also
always defined it.
regulated accessory dwelling units. Otherwise, they would just be turned into, like college rental housing or, that type of thing, where they,
Assume you have some data to back that up.
no, of course not. But that's that's what we have been doing, and we didn't see a need to change it at this point, but.
Just pointing out it's inconsistent with the intent of the LD 2003.
It doesn't say that we can't do that.
do pretty much what you want to do. So my last comment is the 40% or 1,000 square feet. And we talked about this before. We went from 650, we discussed 800, and we eventually got up to with 1,000, which I thought was a very reasonable level to get there. So, a little research on my part, I can tell you that none of you sitting on the dais tonight can get to the 1,000. None of your houses is large enough. The only one who can is Dick Smith, who's not here.
You need 2,500 square feet to get to 1,000.
There you go. So you guys live in well-established neighborhoods, good family neighborhoods, and yet you will not be able to, and I'm looking at Mr. Kiley because he talked last time about bringing a relative in. You know, Mr. Kiley can only get 825 square feet on his nearly 6-acre lot in order to accommodate another family member or anyone. So anyway, that's my comment. I prefer that you just let it go to the limit of 1,000, not worry about the 40%. Because I know there was a lot of discussion about, well, if you got a smaller house and you go to 1,000%, then you're going to flip the primary unit versus the accessory unit. But 1,000 square feet is really not that much. If you think about how most of you live, 1,000 square feet could be uncomfortable for a family. And if that's what we want to do, we want to bring families to town, we want to provide more housing for people, then we need to accommodate them that way. So, thank you.
Thanks, Wayne.
Chris, just to be clear, only because of Wayne's last comment, that square footage is the total livable square footage of an existing home. Okay.
Any other comments from the public? Yeah,
We had a board member that couldn't be here this evening, but he submitted some comments. Brittany, my comments for the public hearing. The easing of the park.
which
Oh,
board member?
sorry, Dick Smith. That's helpful. The easing on the parking requirements will not work for towns like Kennebunk, as we have no public transportation network, and that is what this plan depends on to replace personal auto transportation. My opinion is this requirement should be left at our current parking standards, or we'll have people parking on roads creating dangerous situations that are contrary to our safety protocols. 2, allowing higher density development in areas of town not served by sewer and town water is going to lead to exacerbating the continued pressure on our most fragile lands, including our important wetlands. If lack of affordable housing is a problem that needs addressing, even more pressing is our need to protect our wetlands and marginal infrastructure. 3, reclassifying our suburban residential zone as a growth zone will take an area of town that needs more protection and instead put greater developmental pressure on an area of town that contains a lot of environmental habitat. 4, my overarching view of this legislation is that it painted the many divergent areas of our state with one broad brush. Portland is not Steep Falls, and Kennebunk is not Biddeford. This legislation was rushed through without proper dialogue from the many diverse areas of the state, and it will produce many unintended consequences in communities and all around the state.
Thank you. If there's no further comments, we'll close the public hearing. Board members, discussion? Dan?
So based on tonight's conversation and public comments, I guess the question at this point, though, is what other elements do we need to discuss beyond the short-term housing difference in terms of our 15 days versus 30 for surrounding towns and communities? I guess more just looking for directional guidance.
So, Brittany, you're saying the surrounding towns just have 30 days or less? You're not saying that they have other numbers besides, you're saying?
There was one community that had 28 days, but most of the communities that I looked at, it was 30 days or less.
I wasn't sure if you were saying there's 30 or under, or how they defined it, but you're saying that most of them were 30 with one exception, but.
Yep. 30 days or less, yep, if you're staying somewhere 30 days or less.
And Christiana, just one more
Yeah.
point, I think, going back to what, I concur with Dick's comments that, this was in some ways rushed, but certainly broad brushed across the state. So I do feel that, we're in a position where we're trying to balance the needs of our town with that of the mandate, and trying to do that in the best intentions possible, looking out for, not only growth and future development, but obviously the property owners and residents that here today. So, there is a lot of challenges to this, and, we may not get everything right, but I think we're starting with a good framework, and we can always change. But I think instead of opening up things so broadly and so widely that to start conservative can always be changed and get a little broader.
Thanks, Dan. Janice?
Yeah, this was a tough one because I think as a town, we have long recognized, certainly on this board, the importance of asking developers coming before us to allocate some of their construction to affordable housing. We know that there's a real need. Workforce housing, there isn't enough of it out there for the families, couples, and the single people who need it. So that's why the variety of different sizes that I think we can accomplish with the ADUs may work in the favor of someone who just needs something small versus a family, but still allow a family in some locations. So I think what we proposed is probably a really good start. And as Dan suggested, I think, we may need to adjust things down the road, but I think this is a good start.
Janice? Bob?
I kind of concur with what both Dan and Janice have said. When we put the accessory apartment unit in back in whenever the heck we did that, the intent was to be able to allow some people that couldn't afford to stay in the big houses they were living in and give them an opportunity to have a unit that they could live in and then rent out. So this kind of expands on that opportunity and gives more of an affordable housing option for families to be able to come into Kennebunk. Having worked on a couple of affordable housing projects in this town with Avesta, you know what the importance is, and it isn't always necessarily a family that's of a large size that requires a 2,000 square foot home to come into, but to be able to be here as a workforce housing unit. Some of those may be single persons with a child or just single person that needs some place to be able to afford to live. So I think this is a step in the right direction, but I do agree with Dick. This was shoved down everybody's throat in this state, and there was not enough foresight given to what this actually means. From that standpoint, I agree, and we've discussed this as we've had the discussions on this, is that we can come back and revisit this afterwards. Zoning is not static. It always can be revised. So if things don't work out based on the way the state legislature has mandated us to work for, then we can always come back as a community and say, hey, there's a bullet hole written through this thing and we need to fix it, and we can go back and amend it. But again, this plan as it is before us is something that goes from us with a recommendation on to the Board of Selectmen to have their public hearing, and then for them to decide to put it on the town warrant. And then it's up to the voters to approve what the language is that we've been discussing since January in terms of how we're going to implement this zoning. So it then comes down to the voters. If the voters approve it, then it goes into effect on the, what did you say, the 14th? On the 14th. So, and then we also, as I said, if we find out after 6 months to a year there are holes in it that, one, we didn't think about that should be changed to be more flexible, or things that need to be peeled back and not looked at in a positive sign, then we can revisit that at another time. And again, that would go back to the selectmen to bring to the voters to make any action on any zoning change. So, while it's not a fail-safe issue, I think we've tried to put a couple of belt and suspenders on some things. The one I think we do need to follow up with a final decision on is the short-term rental. But otherwise, I think that's where we are at this point.
guys have said it all very well, and I concur with your statements. As to the short-term rental thing, I mean, I think honestly, it's not something we really wanted to tackle. We were waiting to hear more direction from the Board of Selectmen on it, but I guess there was a need, some felt a need to address it at least in some regard here, so that there was a fear that a bunch of ADUs would turn into short-term rentals, even though I feel like that's not really a threat, but, and so we had to start somewhere, and we pulled 15, we thought that was reasonable, but, I mean, we're open, and now we have some information from other towns that they usually stated at 30, so I don't think that's a major change. I think that's something that we can amend tonight if that's what we choose to do, without having to reopen the public hearing and renotice things. So I guess I'm up to discussion about that from board members.
Just about the short-term rental, Chris?
Short-term rentals moving into 30 days versus 15.
Yeah.
30 or less.
You know, look at the ones that Brittany cited, you know, and they're ahead of us in here. And, you know, we've got the analysis, so we know what they did. And maybe to start out, we borrow what the biggest number have done, you know, and hope that they made the right decision. And then again, I mean, what would be involved if we went with a specific number today, and then we looked at it over a season, say, changing that number next year this time, what would that involve?
This same process, it would be a zoning change. So it would be one of the items that would be before the board as a zoning change to change it to 15 or 30 or 45 or whatever it determined to be. I'm also not sure, Chris might be able to talk to this a little bit more, there might be a ordinance at the select board level, at the town level, so that we might be able to take it out of our section, but that would be the hope, that they would have their own section and we wouldn't have to leave it in the zoning ordinance.
Yeah, I think the town, at least up to this point, has been discussing short-term rentals through the lens of licensing and not through land use. So if we put it in through the land use lens, it's a little bit more difficult. I don't want to call it vested rights, but you do get into arena where a use that now has become accepted could be viewed as a nonconformity. I think in this avenue, what we've identified as the biggest risk is down by the beach. And I don't know that any new creation of accessory units, because remember, these aren't always going to be detached. They could be internal reconstructions or reconfigurations. The 30-day window does start to get a little bit longer when you think about the length of that season. You start to get to 2 weeks, it is a lot different. So what you've really done is you've given the board more time to decide exactly how they want to go through and regulate those. So I think in terms of a first approach to it, you're sort of keeping up your guard and just allowing these things to progress throughout the rest of town in a more thoughtful way. One thing I would like to mention, and just in response to Mr. Smith's comments, there is an agenda item on the select board's agenda tomorrow night. The Kennebunk Sewer District is actually looking to amend their charter to expand their service area to match the growth areas, primarily out in West Kennebunk. In this law, in what's happening, recognizing there could be abilities for sewer and the density that can go with it, it's just smart for them to do that. I don't think they see it happening right away, but you know, when you see some of these projects and the timelines that may take 2 years to develop, they're trying to get ahead of it right now. So that's something that's sort of happening in concert. You see where most of the development or a large percentage of development has been over the last couple of years. I know one of them that went in off of Warren's Way, where after the approval had asked about could they connect to sewer, not being part of it. The subdivision sold, and the person who purchased it wanted to actually consider that, and it just wasn't available to them. So there's some steps happening in parallel that really build off of what the board has identified, both from the comprehensive plan and what's been in place before. So I do think it doesn't feel good to be told how to go about it. I think we already had a lot of mechanisms in place. So this isn't a big shift, which is good. I do know, and I think we've represented this before, there's a lot more work for us to do to understand how to make some changes, and I think we're probably going to start saying June of '24 is that next round. We won't be in position to do it November, but next year, so you guys aren't done, sorry.
Never done. It's always, again, changing.
Yeah, as you were starting to speak, it occurred to me, the logistics of the timing here, because if you're going to impose a requirement like Kennebunkport has, where people who have short-term rentals have to have an inspection done, have to register the homes, it's not something you can spring on them in June. So we're really talking, another year and a half down the road, or probably 2 years down the road, before we can measure the results of whatever number of days we come up with here tonight. And, my feeling with anything like this is, I want to have as many members of the public speaking to this as possible, because this is kind of a hot subject in all coastal towns, and I want to make sure we get input. So I'm willing to start with whatever is the, overwhelmingly used number, just to get it rolling, and then adjust from there.
I would just say that starting at 15 really, I think takes out, targets the most probably most thought of population of having negative impacts on communities, the shortest of the short term. So like the weekender parties, the week-long, spring break type of things, or summer vacations. When you start getting 2, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, those are families staying for a long time, and there's less impacts, I think, negative impacts on communities is my thought. So by starting with 15, you're really kind of being more targeted than the 30. I think you're having that's a much broader number of people you might impact with this. So anyway, so I think starting with 15 might make some sense because it's targeting less people and maybe the more disruptive segment of that. But that's my thought. Good, Dan?
Yeah, Chris, I tend to agree with you. I think, the intent of LD 2003 was to increase housing stock, not necessarily increase rental stock. And I think two things is, one is that we are, the shoreline zone, which has already been brought up tonight as potential rental concerns right now or questions, is excluded already because it's not part of LD 2003. So that leaves the remainder of the town that is covered by this. And if the goal is, again, to increase housing stock for long-term residents, I think starting with 15 days makes sense, and we can always expand again to the same principles we talked about earlier.
Well, I think when we first started talking about this was make sure we just didn't open up the barn door and then the paddock gates. At least put a plug in there and allow the selectmen to hopefully come forward with something that will, as Chris indicated, would be taking it out of our zoning and just putting it on a regulatory basis. But by not putting something in there, we've left an opening. So I think the 15 is what we came up with. To your point, it's more the real short-term type of rental process that we really would be concerned with, so versus the 30-day that some of the others have done. And I think that probably equally was more of an arbitrary number they picked as well. So just knowing how zoning amendments get worked on. So I would say we stay with the 15. And, okay.
I think it sounds like we have consensus there, so we'll leave that as is, the 15. Was there another? I think it was it, right? The only other.
Yeah, I just added the definition and then that statement to the section for ADUs.
Any other discussion about changes? Okay. Then, is there a motion to be made?
I think you got to close the public hearing first.
I did that already.
Oh, I didn't hear you say that. So.
Yeah. Okay. We would need a motion to make a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen. So you can make a motion to make a positive recommendation to the Board of Selectmen for these zoning changes.
Make a motion to send a positive recommendation to the Board of Selectmen for the proposed changes to our regulations.
Friendly amendment to comply with LD 2003.
Okay, yes, in response to LD 2003.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion's been made and second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? None. So we'll forward that. The motion is passed with 4 in favor, none opposed. We forward a positive recommendation to the Board of Selectmen for their action. All right. Next item on the agenda is the public hearing for a subdivision amendment at Millstone Farm. Again, we'll hear from town planner briefly on the application, then we'll hear from the applicant. Board members may ask any initial questions for clarification of the changes, and then we'll open up the public hearing for that application. After the public hearing, we may take action on the application. Brittany.
So this is an amendment to the already approved plan for Millstone Farm. There was a discrepancy in the property line with the abutting property. So the applicant supplied a new plan showing the corrected property line and the new lot areas for lots 1, 2, and 3. The new lot areas still meet the zoning requirement of 20,000 square feet. The applicant was before the board on February 27th for their preliminary review. The board didn't see any thing that needed to be added to the plan or addressed, so they are now before the board for their public hearing. And then after the public hearing, the board should review the findings of fact.
Thank you.
And Terridan Consultants is representing Ben Hill Phase 2 LLC.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Jim Corbin with Teradyne Consultants, here on behalf of the applicant. I'm also the stamping land surveyor for the subdivision. Thank you, Brittany. I think you described it well. An error was made in the initial boundary survey, which was found when we went to set the pins for the approved subdivision. So we corrected the error, and this is where we're at to fix the approved subdivision.
Board members have any initial questions? Dan?
Based on their presentation on 27th, I'm good.
At this point, we'll open up the public hearing. If anybody from the public has questions or comments about this application, please come to the podium. Seeing no comments, we'll close the public hearing. Board members have any other additional comments or questions? I think this is a pretty straightforward application, correcting a minor error to the survey. Seeing no other concerns or questions, we'll go through the findings of facts and conditions of approval. Town of Kennebunk Planning Board findings of facts and conditions of approval for a final major subdivision plan of Millstone Farm Amendment. Property owner Ben Hill Phase 2 LLC, location Millstone Farm Lane. Project description is a subdivision amendment, property line correction between subdivision and abutting property owner. Plan book 423, page 43. In the West Kennebunk Village Residential Zoning District, Assessor's Map Map 30, lots 177, 178, 179, and 99-999. Kennebunk Planning Board has reviewed the above noted development utilizing the Kennebunk standards for reviewing land subdivisions and the Kennebunk zoning ordinance. Based upon the application and materials submitted in support of the application, together with the evidence submitted at the public hearing on the application, the Planning Board makes the following findings with respect to the standards of Title 30A, subsection 4404, and Article 11, Section 8 of the zoning ordinance guidelines listed below. A. MRSA 30A, subsection 4404. Number 1, pollution will not result in undue water or air pollution. In making this determination, it shall at least consider the elevation of land above sea level and its relation to the floodplains, nature of soils and subsoils and their ability to adequately support waste disposal, and the slope of the land and its effect to on effluents and the availability of streams for disposal of effluents in the applicable state and local health and water resource regulations. That standard is met. Brittany, I should still go through all of these, and, I mean,
It's the only findings we have for subdivision, but a lot of these were addressed under the original plan, so I don't know if you want to.
Changes are really only adjusted to.
Right. So like for sufficient water, that was already met with the original approval. So I don't know if you want to say that the proposed amendment doesn't change the original approvals with regards to
Okay.
the big ones like the water supply.
I'll just go through the numbers, talk about the titles, maybe not go through the detail, and then go through that way. 2 has sufficient water, that standard is met. These changes don't affect the previous approval in that regard.
You could probably just make a general statement, the ones that you're going through. Just make a general statement in the findings that it complies with the previous approved plan and there's no change. It's one statement, and then just get to the numbers and just say no change, rather than having to read all that text again.
Yeah, so,
Save your voice.
yep. The amended subdivision doesn't change. Most of the approval criteria, we'll go through and just mark out which ones are met and which ones may be affected by the change. Is that what you're saying? Yeah. So 1 is met, 2 is met, 3, water supply is met, 4, erosion is met, 5, traffic, standard is met, 6, sewage disposal is met, 7, municipal solid waste is met, 8, aesthetic, cultural, and natural values is met, 9, conformity with local ordinances and plans. The standard is met, the new lot lines still conform in all regards to the zoning regulation, performance standards for the underlying zone. 10, the standard financial capacity is met. 11, surface waters, still, standard is met. Groundwater is met. Flood areas is met. 14, stormwater is met. 15, river, stream, or brook is met. 16, freshwater wetlands is met. 17, not applicable. 18, not applicable. 19, not applicable. 20, not applicable. And B, Article 11, Section 8 is not applicable. This is a non-lot, single-family subdivision amendment. So is there a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the findings of fact and conditions of approval for an amendment to the final.
And the final subdivision plan.
Yeah,
So
that's,
you're doing both, right?
yeah, for the final major subdivision plan of Millstone Ridge, as conditions, there really are no conditions.
No conditions, as,
Just the Millstone Farm amendment to the plan. That'd be the only thing friendly amendment-wise.
Okay, just to change its property line. Thank you.
Second.
motion has been made and second. All those, any discussion, sorry. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None. 4 in favor, none opposed. The plan is approved. Thank you.
If they're ready.
We can sign them after, there's no
You can
changes.
pick it back up later.
You can leave them, yeah.
The bill may take a long time, but I don't know.
But it may not. Next item on our agenda be a public hearing for 61 York Street. Again, we will hear from the town planner. And then we'll hear from the applicant to go over the proposed project. Board will ask any initial clarifying questions. After that, we will open up a public hearing and hear public comments on the application. After the public hearing, the board may take action on the project. Brittany.
So this is a multifamily development at 61 York Street. They are proposing 12 units, 3 of which are affordable. The application is before the board for a public hearing. This is in the York Street Mixed Residential and Commercial Zone. It's currently a vacant piece of property. The applicant was before the board on February 13th for a preliminary review. The board discussed several items such as spreading the affordable units throughout the site, landscaping improvements such as evergreens for screening, lighting concerns, and questions about site circulation. The applicant was supplied a list of these items to address, which they did in a memo to the board. The property is located in the MRCU district, which requires review under Article 10, Section 23, Design Review. The applicant supplied the checklist under addressing all those criteria. They are looking to reduce the 20-foot perimeter buffer to a 50-foot, the 50-foot perimeter buffer down to a 20-foot perimeter buffer for landscaping. They did provide a narrative of why they are requesting that. They are also requesting a reduction from 100 feet to 86 feet for the distance between Waterford Green and their curb cut. The original request was for 91 feet. This change is due to the curb radius update. And then they're also requesting to eliminate the 2-foot wide planting strip between the on-site walkway and parking area. There was another memo from the town engineer that was supplied to the board and available for review by abutters on the agenda, a memo from the police department, and a memo from the fire department. I also attached public commentary to the memo that was supplied to the board, and I just had a general comment of narrative A should be updated to state 3 affordable units. We did get another response memo from the applicant, but he's going to be going through those tonight as part of his presentation. And I did receive another letter, I believe Friday afternoon. So once public comment is done, I can read that into the record.
Thank you. Floor is yours.
Thank you. Hi, good evening. My name's Connor Ritter. I'm with Walsh Engineering, representing 61 York Street LLC for this project. For the benefit of the members of the public here tonight, I'm just going to give an overview of the whole project, and then I'm going to start going through comments that I've received from the board and from the public and make sure I have everything addressed for everyone's knowledge. So first off, what we have existing is a 1.2 acre parcel of vacant land at the corner of York Street and Waterford Green Drive. York Street being public and Waterford Green Drive being a private road. Currently, there's a gravel pull-off area, but the area is primarily wooded. It appears to have been cleared within the not too distant past, so most of it's a lot of young vegetation. The perimeter of the lot does have some larger, more aged trees on it. We're surrounded by, there's a condo complex, a single-family house, a motel, and a hotel in the York Street Mixed Residential and Commercial Use District. We are allowed by the ordinance 1 unit per 5,000 square feet, utilizing the additional affordable density bonus. We are proposing 12 units, 3 of which are affordable. And going into that, the property was originally permitted and approved back in 2005 as a commercial development. So we've taken it in a different direction for a residential use that is more in line with the goals and needs of the town and the comprehensive plan. The 3 units that are within the development that are to be designated as affordable, these are going to be, all the units within the development are going to be identical, and the identification of these is going to be mixed in based on tenant occupancy and selection. So there's nothing that's going to be designated as this is the affordable unit, and that will all be enforced by a declaration of restrictive covenants that will be recorded with the county. The ordinance requires 27 parking spaces to service the units, and those are going to be, that parking requirement is going to be met. So there will be 27 units on, or 27 parking spaces on site. The project is going to connect to public water, sewer, electrical, and communication utilities via York Street. The various districts have been reached out for their feedback on reviews and requests for connections. The landscape perimeter buffer, we intend to maintain the existing vegetation to the extent practical, and then we have supplied a landscaping plan that intends to supplement that with additional evergreen trees for four-season buffering, as well as other plantings to really make sure we do the most with that reduction from the 50-foot to the 20-foot buffer that we are requesting. Among our waivers, as Brittany mentioned, we are requesting a reduction from 50 to 20 feet. As I said, we are looking to kind of fill in that 20 feet with sufficient landscaping, but the purpose behind that request is we've done our best to fit the size of this development within the compact space of a fairly narrow property, being only 150 feet in width. So we're trying to include that in, and then we're also including the 3 affordable units to really maximize the benefit of that for the town. We are requesting a reduction in the driveway separation from 100 feet to 86 feet. As Brittany mentioned, this was changed from our original request from 91 feet down to 86 in order to allow for a required increase to the curb radii on the driveway at its entrance to York Street. The initial request is intended to preserve a large conifer tree that's at the front of the site that we would like to maintain for kind of buffering and visual fidelity onto the York Street. The other change, and we have had this, we've had this reduction assessed by a traffic engineer as well to gauge if there would be any impact to the traffic coming on and off of the site, and they reported back that it would be there would be no negative impact due to the reduction. Our third waiver we are requesting is to eliminate the 2-foot wide planting strip that is required between the edge of parking and sidewalk. This is in order to provide a greater separation between the sidewalk and the dwelling units, and because the 2-foot landscaping strip doesn't tend to maintain very well. You got a lot of people trampling over it, and it doesn't really serve it as well as it would like to. So rather than that, we'd prefer to have that landscaping on the unit side where it can flourish a little better. Going into responses to the previous memo I received for this meeting tonight that I received from Brittany on last Wednesday. As she mentioned,
Do you have copies of those of your memo? I know we got an electronic copy mailed to us today, but I wasn't sure.
I have one copy here.
I wasn't sure if you brought copies of that. That's all right.
No.
Continue.
Yeah, I can definitely get copies if you need any.
It's okay.
Okay. It's all in response to what was received in the memo, so it should be pretty one-to-one. As Brittany mentioned, her comment, attachment A narrative states that there is only 2 affordable units. This has been updated to state that there will be 3 affordable units. And then following that, a response to the comment from the town engineer. He stated that an emergency vehicle turnaround is identified with limited depth and radii. And he would like that we demonstrate that it can service the largest emergency vehicle provided by the Kennebunk Fire Rescue Department. So we have run additional vehicle simulations through the development using the largest ladder truck that was provided to me by the fire chief. And we have successfully managed to allow it to turn around on the property to gain access and then make a turn and get back to York Street. It did require a minor revision to the plan of a small 2-foot in length of grass pavers at the end of the Hammerhead turnaround. This was recommended as a solution by the town engineer in order to provide this turnaround for the larger vehicles. I've provided a plan sheet SK2 that demonstrates this ladder truck turnaround movement that is with this response letter that you should be getting copies of. I also have a copy of it here as well for viewing. Going into the Kennebunk Police Department's memo, their first comment is in regard to making sure that the housing complex is visible and well lit. In response to that, we have provided a photometric plan showing the lighting that is on the property. This being in balance with making sure that we have no bleed over the property line with our lighting, and it is dark sky compliant as well. His second comment is that the address to the complex in each unit must be clearly visible from the roadway or the parking lot, and we will make sure that there are address numbers posted on each unit that are clearly visible to comply with this. His third comment is ensuring that there is enough parking for both residents and visitors. In response to that, we have provided the required 27 parking spaces per the ordinance to supply the development. And then his final comment is in regards to sidewalk access to ensure that pedestrians who live in the complex have safe walking areas along Route 1. And to that, we have provided sidewalks with access to every single unit, crosswalks where necessary, and those sidewalks do connect back into the sidewalk that runs along Route 1 as well. So I believe that addresses the police department memo. Going into the Kennebunk Fire Rescue's memo, they iterated a similar comment to the town engineer regarding the ladder truck turnaround, which has been modeled and supplied. So that that works throughout the property. And then to follow up on the public commentary that we have received prior to this meeting. The first comments we received from the public were brought to us by the Kennebunk Cottages. They had a regard concerning the reduction of the 50-foot landscape buffer, which places the road in close proximity to their pool and playground area. The date of this comment was just after our sketch plan review, and we believe that this comment has been addressed since then due to the driveway having moved from the south side of the property to the northern side of the property, which now places the row of units between their pool and playground area and our driveway, kind of alleviating that concern about the road proximity. The next comments we received were from the Waterford Green Condominium Association. They had a concern regarding drainage and stormwater leaving the property. What we have on our development is we've designed a stormwater system in order to collect, detain, and infiltrate stormwater from the development. This will pick up water through a series of roof drains, catch basins, and transport it into a subsurface detention and infiltration system. And with utilizing that system, we are meeting the stormwater requirements that are outlined in the subdivision review ordinance, the performance standards, and the site plan review for stormwater, making sure that the stormwater system has been designed for the 25-year return period, and the rate of flow does not exceed the rate of flow prior to the development in all areas. We have also assess this on the 2 and 10-year return periods as well, to further ensure that it's not just the largest of storms that we're not seeing an increase, but in more frequently occurring storms as well, that there is not an increase to the rate of runoff exiting the property. The Condominium Association also has concerns regarding the waiver to the 50-foot landscaping buffer. In response to this, we have provided various evergreen trees throughout the landscaping buffer, which are intended to get fairly sizable, approximately 12 feet diameter and 25 feet tall, in order to provide a 4-season buffer. We have also included other various landscaping, and this will supplement the existing trees that can be seen along the property lines of our parcel. These trees will provide 4-season buffer, increase the buffer density without crowding or shading out the development, which is also another concern for such a small lot. We want to make sure that we don't plant things that are too large, that all of a sudden everything around us gets dark. And then the last person that we received public comments from prior to this meeting was a Brenda Robinson. And to her comments, her first comment was that there doesn't seem to be a list of waivers that was included with the application. Our list of waivers was included with attachment B of our application, and I have also included said list of waivers on plan sheet C 0.1 of the subdivision plans. So it'll be listed right on the plan that will eventually be signed. Her second comment is regarding the building setbacks. Believes that the building setbacks and entryway distances are significantly lower than what is required by the town. Going through the town's ordinance, the actual front and rear yard setbacks for the MRCU district are 25 feet, with the side yard setback being 20 feet. This, of course, is with the landscaping buffer on top of that being 50 feet, which we are requesting down to 20 feet, which meets the 20-foot side yard setback that is typical for the MRCU district. We are meeting the net lot area per dwelling unit standards with the 25% density bonus for affordable housing. And all waivers that we are requesting have been done with the intent of the site plan review and subdivision review standards, stating the circumstances in which we are requesting the waivers and believing there are no adverse impacts to general health, safety, or welfare of the town. Her third comment is in regards to traffic. A traffic study has no date, resulting in possible erroneous traffic count. Route 1 has a serious traffic problem for several years, as is already over-trafficked. In response to this, our traffic assessment is dated for March 6th. And it was conducted utilizing the site trip generation based on the 11th edition of the Institute of Transportation Engineers Trip Generation Handbook, which is an industry standard. And based on the assessment by our traffic engineer, it is an extremely low trip generator, and it adheres to all traffic requirements of the town of Kennebunk, such as site entrance, site distance requirements. Her fourth comment was the entryway from the development to York Street poses a serious traffic hazard at a point on York Street that is already a hazard. To which my response, the development is an extremely low trip generator, and it adheres to all traffic requirements stated by the town. And her final comment is that the proposal is another example of an unattractive development, squeezing far too many residential units into an already small area. As stated previously, the proposed development meets the minimum net lot area per dwelling standards posed for the district when factoring in the affordable housing density bonus. And the development we're proposing actually falls well in line with what is outlined in the town's comprehensive plan, specifically under the future land use plan. Such items are providing housing that is in line with the average household size of the town. The town states that the average household is 2.25 occupants, and we are providing 2-bedroom units. There is a shortage of affordable options, especially for renters. All 12 units will be rental units, and a quarter of them will be affordable for use. And with that being 25%, it actually is helping achieve the town's goal of reaching a 10% affordable housing inventory within the town. Going further into the comprehensive plan, there's statements in favor of reducing the landscaping buffer for this exact purpose of a multifamily lot in a growth district to enable the development of smaller parcels. In our case, we have a fairly narrow parcel, so this falls in line with that. We're providing that affordable 25%. And we are developing in an area that does not have a negative impact on environmental features such as wetlands, streams, rivers, and aquifers, as there are none on our site or kind of in the very close proximity, kind of just adjacent to us either. And then following that, that was all of the public comments we had received previously. And then there were a number of comments provided to us from the board during the last meeting that I can run through right now. The first comment was a request to spread out the affordable units throughout the site. Previously, there were select units that were identified as affordable. Since then, we have adjusted that in order to do just that and spread out those units rather than designating any specific unit as they're all identical. We are leaving that to the tenant selection and occupancy. So when an affordable tenant is looking to rent, they'll have their choice of which unit. That way there's no bias among it, and that is going to be enforced by a declaration of restricted covenants, a draft of which was included with the site plan application package. We have updated the plan. The second comment was update the plan to show 3 affordable units, which we have done. So we're meeting that 25% over 12 units that we need. The third comment was in regards to the landscaping plan. We were requested to use quote unquote native species. And what we have done in response to this is the plants selected and placed throughout our development are all common in the nursery industry, used by many homeowners and landscape designers in the area, and they are all sold at local nurseries to the area as well. None of the plants are considered exotic or known to be invasive. With our site being proposed to be fully developed, we want to make sure that we select vegetation that will meet the specific buffering requirements we're looking to achieve within the limited space. And the plants were selected to do just that and kind of thrive in the condition that they'll be planted in. The landscaping buffer, the comment 4, landscaping buffer needs to include plantings that will also buffer in the winter months and should be more substantial on property lines. The landscaping buffer has been revised to include 2 types of evergreen trees throughout the buffer. These will be 4-season, and as stated before, they're meant to supplement what is existing without overcrowding or shading out the area. Comment number 5 is cleaning up the invasive species on site per DEP standards, and we have added a note to our existing conditions and removals plan indicating to remove all invasive vegetation identified on site, as is the intent. We definitely like to do that. There's a lot of that crabby stuff. No one likes going through that, and all the better to get rid of it. Compared to the sketch plan, comment number 6, compared to the sketch plan, this plan does this plan require more clearing in the back? Compared to the sketch plan to the preliminary plan that was submitted, any additional clearing that was noted was due to just the plan being further progressed from the sketch plan state, additional grading being laid out, and of course our landscaping plans have taken in what the plan currently looks like and its grading to make sure to fill that space. Comment number 7, the sides of units 1 and 2 do not have riprap roof drip line on them. And was this intended? And to that, yes, the units 1 and 2 were already not intended to have roof drip lines as the other units were, due to their positioning kind of on the northeast corner of the property and how the stormwater runoff directs itself from there. It's not necessary in order to achieve the intent of our kind of stormwater management design. Comment number 8, can sidewalks be added to get to the trash area so residents are not walking through the site? This is in regards to kind of the the walking path from units 1 and 2 over to the trash area. And to this, an extension of the sidewalk going along that northern side of the driveway would add a significant amount of impervious area in order to get that working, or kind of get that pathway along there. And it would also obstruct one of our larger snow storage areas that we are intending on site, because now that area would want to be curbed and lay clear for the sidewalk. The recommendation in lieu of having a sidewalk there is that tenants follow the sidewalk as we have it proposed, utilizing the crosswalk just after units 1 and 2, follow along the sidewalk, and then using the curb tip down to cross the driveway midway through the larger parking area where they can clearly see in both directions, make sure that they are crossing at a safe point, and then accessing the trash from there at a shorter crossing. Comment number 9, will there be lighting on the back of deck units? If so, include it in the lighting plan. In response to this, we have updated our photometric plan to include wall pack lights on the back of each unit, just to make sure that that has been considered, and our lighting plan still meets the requirements of no light bleeding off the property onto abutters. Number 10, confirm the proposed lighting is full cutoff, and I have confirmed that the proposed lighting is full cutoff and dark sky compliant, so there is no issue there. Number 11, it was requested for a more in-depth narrative for the request for the 50-foot landscape buffer. I've included a written narrative, a more expansive written narrative in attachment B of the preliminary package, but also, as I've discussed here, kind of those constraints and what we've done to alleviate them with our landscaping. Number 12, confirmation from the post office about the cluster mailbox location. I have reached out to the Kennebunk post office for their review of the mailbox location. They were in favor of it, as it's shown on the plan, and we will make sure that a sufficient number of parcel lockers are provided in order to serve the development as is requested by them. That correspondence has been included in attachment E of the submission package. Question number 13. Article 10, Section 23, Design Review Checklist. You state some criteria have been met. Please state why in the checklist. I have revised the checklist in the most recent submission that you have received in order to provide descriptions on all criteria that have been met or are not applicable to the development. So you can find that in attachment B of the package. Item number 14, respond to the town engineer review memo. This is in regards to the memo that was received prior to the last meeting, and that response has been included. That response involved concerns regarding the fire truck turnaround, which have been addressed, as well as the entrance radii that has been discussed and addressed as well. Question number 15, check with the fire department and town engineer about truck turning plan. As stated, that has been addressed with both parties, and a revised truck turning plan has been provided. Question 16, water and sewer district reviews. We have sent both districts full plan sets for their review. the Kennebunk, Kennebunkport, and Wells Water District returned our review approved of our design as shown. I am still awaiting further response from the Kennebunk Sewer District. I will have to follow up with them and make sure that they're on board with that, but that approval will be, we'll make sure to get their approval on this project. Question number 17, does this driveway entrance require MDOT approval? The driveway entrance does not fall under MDOT's jurisdiction, and it's well below their threshold of 100 new peak hour trips that would require a traffic movement permit from them. Question number 18, it was asked if we can utilize Waterford Green Drive for access to the site. In response to that, Waterford Green Drive is a private driveway or a private street in possession of Waterford Green Condominium Association per their the release deed recorded in the York County Registry of Deeds. We did not look to negotiate for the rights and responsibilities to access this private street for a few reasons. One of the reasons was to keep additional traffic off of Waterford Green Drive, which, as seen by some of the public comments, there's a few concerns about traffic on Route 1 and Waterford Green Drive. So having a separate entrance keeps the traffic off of their street. And any additional expenses that may be caused due to making such an agreement, potentially any kind of maintenance responsibilities or ownership that would be placed on 61 York Street in order to gain that access will end up being challenging in contrast to the affordable housing we're looking to provide. Kind of ups the costs of everything, which makes it more challenging to provide this housing. And the last question, question number 19, this is a lot of units within a small area, and as mentioned previously, the minimum net lot area per dwelling has been met with the 25% density bonus for affordable housing. Each of these units, I believe, is about 800 square feet or more. So there is a substantial amount of space for each of these 2 bedrooms for kind of comfortable living, which will really benefit the tenants. And having the units spaced out as well in this kind of duplex fashion will give them a little bit of a higher quality. And I believe that is everything I have. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you for that thorough review. Board members have any initial clarifying questions before the public hearing? Bob?
I've got a number of questions, and I'll apologize, I wasn't here for the last meeting, but I was out of town. I know we did the sidewalk. One of the key things I asked for, and I never did see, was an overall, at least an aerial plan showing the relationship of this development to the first building unit at Waterford Green, so we get kind of an idea of where that first structure is in relationship to the, right now, the end of your parking lot, where before it was the end of the units, since you flipped the whole program around. So that was one thing I wanted to see, and I don't see that in any of the documentation you've
I
done.
believe there should be it's a small handout plan, I believe,
Yeah.
for the neighborhood proximity.
In what?
In the submission package.
Booklet itself?
Yes, the booklet itself. There should be
We
a
won't
small
dwell on
size
that for
plan.
right at the moment, but I do have concerns, but I think I'd rather let the public speak, and then I will come up with those comments. There are a number of them that I just have concerns with. But, that being said, I want to reaffirm when this application first came in, that my mother owns a unit in Waterford Green, and I said I could review it objectively, and I just want to reiterate that again and let the board determine whether or not, again,
Yeah, the board mentioned, and our board discussed that at our initial meeting, didn't have a problem. Does board members have any issues with Bob continuing on this review? Seeing none, Bob is not allowed to leave. So, thank you. Janice, do you have any clarifying questions before the public hearing?
Just a couple of things, Chris, thank you. Connor, can you kind of show me where that stockade fence is? It looks like your intent is just to prevent headlights coming in the driveway from hitting the units at Waterford Green. Is that correct? Or do you have a stockade fence in any other location?
The only place we are presently showing a stockade fence is along the end of the roadway, and that extends down to kind of the end of the adjacent sidewalk as well, for the purpose that you just described, in order to prevent any kind of light pollution coming off the end of the driveway towards any of the abutters.
Okay, if the abutters, either of them requested, would you be willing to have a stockade fence around other parts of the project too?
Yes, we would be happy to comply with any request for additional fencing.
Okay, I want to ask about grade. I can see you're aiming for like a, 69, 70% grade across the whole project, and it does start to tip off, about 3/4 of the way in from the road. Where you're coming down, you're starting at like 70 feet and kind of going down, it goes down, down, down to about 64 feet at the bottom. And it looks like on your final grading plan, and it varies a little bit because, it's not the same everywhere. Behind the units and kind of stretching around partway, looks like you got about a 4-foot grade difference over the 20 feet of the proposed buffer area. And you've got plantings in there, which I assume will hold it. Do you think that is excessive enough where you might need a retaining wall to hold that?
The slope of all of the landscape grading that is surrounding the units and kind of at the end where it starts to taper off, that's all been done to a 3-to-1 slope, which should be sufficient for sustaining grass and kind of remaining stable without any kind of additional reinforcement necessary.
Okay, and the gravel parking soil that has to be removed, will you use that on site, or will that be taken somewhere else?
The gravel on site, we have the opportunity to reuse it if it's of value. The condition of that gravel is probably not in great shape, so it may just be hauled off as fill and just kind of removed if it's not usable, or it will be kind of rescreened and regraded into a usable material.
Okay.
We don't have any
and
specific plans for that at the moment, though.
The only thing that struck me, you've asked for the waiver for the requirement for the 2 feet between the parking and the sidewalk. I think my only concern, it's a 5-foot wide driveway, and some people have very long vehicles, and so you're proposing more or less standard parking spots. I'm just worried about somebody, with a long vehicle pulling up to that sidewalk, and their vehicle actually will extend over the sidewalk. And given the fact that the stairs of the units are so close, did you give any thought to how that could be handled?
We are attempting to handle kind of a situation that you're describing by having the end of the parking curbed in order to kind of prevent vehicles from pushing too far off. It actually follows pretty well in line with, I believe, one of the kind of commercial parking, off-street parking standards that is within one of the sections of the ordinance, in order to kind of use that curbed edge to create the separation. As for oversized vehicles, there could be adjustment, or could be accommodations made utilizing the front parking spaces on the east side of Unit 3, where there is not a sidewalk, along the back side of those spaces. So there's potential that if a resident does have a large vehicle that would have an overhang, maybe they're guided to park in one of those as opposed to one of the other spaces that may obstruct the sidewalk.
Okay, thank you. And the light pole that is in the northwest corner, I just happened to think for a second. The height of that is proposed to be 15 feet. How tall is your stockade fence? It's right next to that.
I believe what we have detailed is a 6-foot high stockade fence, and that lighting fixture should be front facing. I would have to double check our lighting plan to make sure that that's intended to just shine forward and not kind of backwards towards the abutter.
Yeah, because I think this might be to Bob's question here. From the property line there, what's the distance between the property line and the first unit of Waterford Green? Yeah, back in that area.
I want to say it's somewhere in the 50 or 60 foot range on the backside there.
Okay, just want to make sure that there's no light trespass. I know you've got zeros along your edge, but
Yep.
when something's sticking up like that close, because right now there's no lights on that property, so the nearest light that those folks are seeing is out on Route 1.
Yep. The other consideration in regards to the lighting is there is going to be the landscape buffer in those trees that will help kind of obstruct that light from passing through to the abutter as well. So there should be even additional blockage leaving the site.
Okay, good. And my only last question is, you haven't proposed any landscaping in front of these units. Was this going to be grass between the sidewalk and the front of the units?
Yes, we're looking to leave the area directly in front of the unit as grassed. It's kind of a narrower space. We've provided some lower vegetation between the units in kind of little clusters by the sidewalk to provide a little bit more natural features. But just due to the spatial limitations, we didn't want to get too much in there where you start ending up with some really shaded and potentially get into like wet areas around the decks.
I think I'd prefer to have something there myself, but, okay, that's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Dan?
Just a couple other points. One, I would like to say I'm happy to hear that you've increased the affordable units up to 3 versus the 2, and that they are not going to be predetermined as 1 and 2 as discussed last time. I think that was a significant change, and appreciate that. One of the questions I have is the extension of the radius for the fire truck. In that area that you're calling out there, I'm just trying to understand. So the intent is that the overhang of the fire apparatus would go into the landscape area, though the rear wheels would hit that 2-foot additional pavers that you're going to be putting in there?
Yes. So only in the case of the fire department's largest apparatus being
Fire
their,
truck? Yep.
it's. Give me one moment. Yeah, being their 47-foot ladder truck. If that is needed to enter the site and gain emergency access, the wheels of that truck will rest on the grass pavers, and then the kind of ladder back end of the truck will overhang into the landscape area, and that's been taken into consideration with kind of the placement of trees, and we have set notes to make sure that that area will be landscaped and provide lawn space, but we won't have any large obstructions that would be negatively impact that emergency access.
Yeah, I guess the only concern, it's hard to tell right now until obviously things get built, that will you have to impact any of those trees on Waterford Green side to achieve that?
I do not believe so. All of the trees, actually, I went out a few weeks ago and took another look at all of that perimeter buffer, and if we had the screen, I had some photos that I could show with that, but that'll have to wait for another time. But yeah, I looked at those, and all of those trees lay on the Waterford Green Drive side of the property line, so we will not be impacting those.
Yeah, just based on the drawing, it looks like you're right at that line for that 20-foot, or for the additional extension of that ladder truck, and those trees weren't on the property. And then the other component of that is that in the bylaws, that will clearly state that this is to be remained free, so no snowplow or remnants of snow will be put into that area at all. It's going to be all managed to the, I guess, eastern end of the property?
Yes.
On units 1 and 2?
Yes, we have the area behind units 1 and 2 designated as a snow storage area, and I believe we may have the area kind of that is cornered by the Hammerhead turnaround designated for snow storage, but we will ensure that the area at the end of the turnaround remains clear for that emergency access.
Okay. That's all I have for now, Chris.
Thank you. Are there stairs off the back decks?
There are not stairs, no.
No. Is there any egress out of the back of the buildings at all? So either the decks, or is there any back door or?
I will have to double check on that and
One
confirm.
of the drawings, kind of like there was a door, maybe, or maybe it's a bulkhead. I'm not even sure. But
There's a bulkhead off the back, and that is staying outside of the landscape buffer as well as the decks.
But it's not an egress for the residents. I know in other projects, if there's access out of the back, the fire department wanted to see how you got people from the back of the building to the front. You needed walkways and such, but it doesn't sound like you have any egress out of the back. Those bulkheads are to get under the buildings from outside, not from getting out of the building from inside.
Yes. Yeah, the bulkhead would be for access to the basement of the unit. I can consult on the egress through the back of the building if that's desired.
No, I just wanted to, I think in the past, I think if the fire department saw egress off the back of the building, they wanted to show you how you got people out to the parking areas.
Okay.
And so you would have to show a walkway connecting the back of those buildings to the front. Doesn't look like you have any room for that kind of thing, so I'm just making sure that you don't, I'm just checking to see if you have access, you need to provide. But it doesn't sound like you do, so you would double check to make sure that if they can get out through the back, they need to be able to get to the front.
Yes.
Is what I'm trying to say, but if they can't get out the back, then you're all set.
Okay, yeah, I don't believe there is egress at the back, so it would, there's no egress path to go along with that.
Not to interrupt, the elevation that was provided does show a stairs off the back porch, so that would just have to be updated to reflect what the site plan shows.
Sure, I'll make sure that architectural plan gets revised.
All right, that's enough for us. We'll open up for the public hearing at this point, and we'll hear from you guys and hear what concerns you guys have with the revisions to this plan. So at this point, we'll open up the public hearing. Please come to the mic and state your name, and we'll hear your comments. On your mic. Yeah, there you go. Thank you.
My name is Marie-Louise St. Ange. I am an owner and full-time resident at Waterford Green, and I am the president of the Homeowners Association, representing our community tonight. I appreciate your listening to our comments this evening. On November 22nd, I delivered a letter to the Planning Board office, and I believe that's in your packet tonight, but I do have copies if anyone needs one. Okay, thank you. So in that letter, we highlight four points, which I'd like to briefly revisit this evening, if I may. In item 1, we refer to elevation and drainage concerns, and I just would like to, again, call the board's attention to the fact that in addition to the drainage on our own campus, there are 2 other properties that generally drain into our area because they have higher elevation than we do. And I'm using these terms as a layperson and not an engineer. So, but the 2 other properties are the hotel and Chamberlain Commons. So there is a point where it all converges, and our culvert system, works hard for us and appropriately, but we're concerned about any burden of additional drainage into Waterford Green. And so we ask that as you review this feature in particular, that you really carefully consider the impacts to Waterford Green. The second item in our letter has to do with setbacks, and given the plans that have been discussed since the November meeting and at the earlier meeting, I believe it was February or early March, all of the proposals seem to indicate that the developer assumes that they will be granted their request for a 20-foot setback. And I would like to just remind the board that we're a residential community, and would ask that you really give serious consideration to granting something more than 20 feet. I understand that the zoning ordinance is for 50 feet, and you've been asked to relax that, but we would ask that you not relax it to 20 feet. Regarding the third point was fencing and vegetation. In our November letter, we requested 6-foot vinyl fencing along Waterford Green, and also vinyl fencing on the western boundary that abuts Unit 2, the first unit in Waterford Green. Given the new proposal, which is cited somewhat differently, we would be amenable to not having fencing along Waterford Green, but let that be a vegetative buffer of maybe a mix of deciduous and coniferous plantings. But we do feel strongly that the community at Waterford Green, and in particular the owners of Unit 2, that there really should be fencing that protects those owners. And we would also ask that the fencing that is used in the proposed development, that it be vinyl and not metal, and that it be in keeping with the fencing that's already in Waterford Green. And that fencing can be viewed very easily near the mailboxes as you enter our community. We would also ask that there be a requirement that the owner of this development be required to maintain the vegetation that's put in and not kind of plant something and let it be. Our fourth point is that there be a requirement, which I've heard referenced tonight, that all exterior lighting be downcast and that there be provisions made so that there's no headlight intrusion onto the first unit in Waterford Green. So those are my prepared comments, but I have a couple more as a result of listening tonight, if I may.
Great.
I'd like to understand what the process is if some of the commitments, some of the proposed commitments, although well-intentioned, fail after the development is in place. What's the recourse for that? The planning board would have completed its work. What's the recourse?
Do you have a specific situation you're speaking about? So if something were to be constructed within the setback, like a deck, and it can be removed, so it could be a violation of the plan. But if you're talking about something along the lines like the stormwater wasn't what was modeled and predicted, that's a little bit different. So do you have a particular concern?
Yeah, thank you, Chris. So I'm going to imagine a circumstance, and not being accusatory in imagining the circumstance, but just trying to vet it ahead of time. The lighting proves to be very intrusive. The water becomes a problem. I mean, any of the provisions that are,
Yep. So those are really good questions. I think a lot of them are compliance-oriented questions. So if lighting has gone up and it seems it to be obtrusive, what we can do is you can bring that concern to the code office. What they can do is they can either work with the property owner, they can do light levels, they can look at whether proper shielding is in place, whether things actually were built the way they're supposed to. That does happen. I think what happens is 2 or 3 years down the road, people do snow removal, things get shifted. So what I would generally say is those operational things are fixable things. It's the things like, is a building properly placed in the right location that isn't as easy curable. But your diligence and concerns, I would say we'd be paying attention to that to try to support the neighbors along through that process. One thing I will say that is very difficult is stormwater. I think the understanding of what stormwater means in terms of the ordinance versus what people are used to. The standard for stormwater talks about not increasing the peak rate of flow. Through the nature of development, there's always going to, or typically going to be more runoff volume. So think about your water running. It may not run faster, it might just run a little bit longer. So when you do drain on, or a property drains onto an abutting property, they need to be especially, the ordinance doesn't look at things, the ordinance does a better job of thinking like that water completely disappears. It doesn't sit on an abutting property. So they can do everything that meets the standard of it, but if there's a situation downstream that doesn't work, like say your culvert does get plugged, and then there's inundation or those types of things, those things can be more problematic. They tend to be further down the road. So I guess to answer your question, most of the time we know if there's a problem right away. If trees die, and that's a condition of approval, they are essentially in violation of the plan, and the property owner or the ultimate property owners are responsible for restoring that. So there are a lot of things that as time goes on, there is attention that needs to be put into maintenance of items. Does that help a little bit?
I appreciate your answer, Chris, but it helps just a tad.
Yeah, I know, I understand.
Because you understand, if there are problems down the road, we would just like to understand, who do we go to talk to about that? Right. Where do we have that conversation?
Yeah.
And I'm certainly not intending to start off anticipating problems, but we would like to be informed. I also would like to ask the board to examine the reply to, I believe, I don't remember if it was Chris or Bob that asked the distance between the property line and Unit 2. So I would ask you to examine the reply. I don't mistrust the reply, but 50 feet just doesn't really resonate.
I haven't found the exhibit that Connor was referring to yet, so
Okay.
I'll let him have to tell me where it is.
So with that, thank you for your examining this proposal. I hope that you understand our concerns, and
Thank
I
you.
understand that our concerns have become requests,
Yep.
so, thanks.
We understand. Thank you.
Hi, it's on? Okay. My name's Catherine, my husband's John Toth. We own the Kennybelt Gallery Motel. We're the abutting property. And I do appreciate a couple of the changes you made on the plan regarding our previous concern. But we still have some additional concerns. I mean, we really, the 20-foot setback is very concerning. I mean, our property is right there. I mean, we're opening up this whole area. I mean, I know you say you're gonna plant trees, but I feel like there's still gonna be a lot of open light. You have all these people that are coming in, parking, facing forward. All their headlights are gonna be facing right towards our cottage doors. And I just feel like we're gonna get a lot of complaints. That's one of my biggest concerns, is the setback. I feel like it's, you know, why does Kennybunk have setbacks of 50, but yet you'll allow anybody to switch it over to 20? That land is usable the way it is. Just because somebody wants to go stick 15 units on there, it just, I mean, I could see if the unit can't even fit a house, that the land is not usable at all, that would make a difference. But where the land is big enough to have a house there, it doesn't make any sense that you would cut the setbacks just to allow somebody to put 15 or 14, whatever units there. It just seems unreasonable to all the abutting properties. And the other thing, our pool, I don't know if it sits. Our pool is probably between units 11 and 10 area, I'm not really sure. A 20-foot setback is not much. Our pool drains to the back, so whenever we
Excuse me,
backwash
you just
our
need,
pool-
you just need to make sure you're speaking
Oh, I'm
into the
sorry.
mic so they can hear you
I'm
at
sorry.
home. Sorry.
So our pool, I think, sits behind probably unit 10 and 11. So whenever I backwash the pool or drain the pool in the fall, that water is gonna run right into that person's backyard. When I drain that pool at the end of the year, I'm bringing it down probably about 2 feet of water that's gonna go right there. So I'm just making that clear.
Can I just ask you a quick question on that regarding the pool?
Yep,
Right here.
sure.
On the survey plan that they're showing what appears to be a fence on your property. Is the pool on the other side of the fence?
The pool is, but that drain goes underneath that fence.
Oh, I know. I just want to try and get an idea where you were talking about. When
Yes.
I started looking at the building.
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted that. Thanks.
So that's another one of my big concerns. And the other thing is that since we did the walk, they've added 3 affordable units, I'm assuming just to get this passed through, because that wasn't in the original plan. Who keeps track of that? Like, who's to say that they're not actually renting 3 as affordable? Is anybody keeping track of what their rents are gonna be? Like, are they actually renting 3 as affordable, or?
Yes, they need to provide documentation to the town, and it's on the deed, so they have to prove that they meet that standard.
So I'm assuming it sounds like these are all rental units, they're not
Yep.
selling the condos? Okay. And then the traffic. There is definitely an issue. I don't know if you guys have been down there lately since Smoke has opened up, but there is definitely, people that goes to Smoke has no place to park. Right now, they're parking in that open lot. They're trying to park by Cheryl's, and Cheryl's blocked it off because she doesn't want them parking there. There is not enough parking for the Smoke people in itself. And that's without the Summit people already being here. So people are already parking on Route 1, which is already causing traffic issues. So I don't know if you have anything else to add.
Just the traffic should be looked at again. Because, I mean, you do have Smokes, Cheryl's, the Port Inn, Waterford Green, our cottages, Agatha James, and then the Webb Hannock condos across the street. So it really should be looked at. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Hello,
Yep, it's on.
I'm Josh Maynard. I am the owner of Smoke BBQ right across the street. How are you guys? Awesome. Yeah, I'm not against affordable housing or growth or, anything like that. I hadn't heard about the plan too much until tonight, and honestly, it sounds like they're trying to pack 10 pounds of bleep into a 5-pound sack in terms of 800 square feet for a 2-bedroom for like a family's gonna live there. Anyway, people can squeeze into whatever they want, but it sounds like they're trying to jam a lot into a little space. The reason why I came and my main concern is the traffic. It's the flow of traffic. It's Waterford Green, Cheryl's, where you come into my parking lot and leave. It's already a cluster. I spent the last 2 years building out Smoke, and all I see are people racing headed north, into town, 50 miles an hour, 55 miles an hour in a 35 mile an hour speed zone. People are like aggressively honking. People are trying to take a right-hand turn onto West Parker, which is right where Smoke is, and people are honking and driving, like swerving, and it's unsafe. It's already completely unsafe. I reached out to the town months ago to request that a crosswalk be put in from Smoke across to the Port Inn. And, I spoke to Chris about that, and he looked down the road and said the sight line wasn't appropriate for a crosswalk. My goal is to slow people down. My goal is to create a pedestrian-friendly environment in that area. Right now, it's dangerous. Someone's gonna die crossing the street. We have to have a crosswalk there. In looking at this project, if that project happens and you add that, right now, the way that Waterford Green is, and you put that next to it, people can't get from Waterford Green across the road headed into town without, the flow is too crazy and it's too fast. There should be a street light at Waterford Green. There should be a street light. There's gonna have to be something there that's gonna slow people down. Because right now, people don't obey the speed limits at all. They just go as fast as they want. It's all out of control. So Chris said we couldn't run a crosswalk across to the Port Inn. He did tell me that if we moved it to the other side of my entryway on the cemetery side, which is the south side, that we could run a crosswalk over to this property here. And he did tell me that he would add that into a note into this plan, that would be something that would have to happen for this project to happen. So I don't see anything about that here. So I'm curious about that. But without a crosswalk, without something to slow people down, someone's gonna die, and then how are we gonna feel about that? Like as a society, we're generally reactive to things. We wait till something horrible happens, and then we decide to, oh, see, geez, whose fault is it? Now what are we gonna do? Let's fix it. Let's fix it now. Let's figure out a way to fix this now. If this is gonna happen, we need a way to slow people down. I'm pretty sure that's all I have to say about that. The traffic assessment thing, whether it measures the amount of traffic, I don't think it measures the speed of traffic. That's my major concern.
Great, appreciate
you.
you coming. Thanks for your comments.
Hi, I am number 2 Waterford Green, the one that you've been hearing about. I am Cindy Flo, and that's my husband Dick back there. We have lived in our unit, number 2 Waterford Green, for 9 years. I cannot speak to you tonight of codes and regulations and those things. I can only speak to you from experience living there. observations of things, observations of other places being built, that kind of thing. So as we look at this, we have been fortunate to have all the trees that are there on our eastern boundary because they are large, deep-rooted, and really help retain water naturally. If you look at, and you've all walked the site plan, but if you look at the 20-foot buffer that they would like to have, but we would like to see it extended to the 30 feet to the regular 50-foot, there are a bunch of big trees in there that they will take down. And that is a real constraint to the natural flow of water being retained. So we are very much requesting and going to my direct head of our Waterford Green Association that, you know, that if we could retain the 50-foot. The other thing is, when you look at, it's only 1.2 acres. And I know we really need housing, but it would seem to me that we could reduce the number of units by maybe 2 and make it easier to build and more reasonable and have maybe half of them affordable housing, 5 and 5, something like that. But putting 12 units is one of the reasons why obviously they're asking for the buffer to be reduced. And so that is just another consideration I'd like to bring about. With the setback, whatever setback we have, we really appreciate the fact that we'll have a good fence. And whether the vinyl fence would be awesome. We're very concerned about the lighting as people driving down and the lights coming right at our home. And if you and you would have to put a lot of trees and make them really big trees to protect that kind of buffer. So as we look at the type of trees, would have to be non-deciduous, you know, all be spruce, pine, whatever that kind of thing is, in the buffer anyway. But as we look at the drainage situation, as you look at this, these 2 drainage things that they're proposing to put in, I am not an engineer of any kind, but I am struggling to try to figure out, the water goes in there, and then they say, well, but if there's an overflow, then it goes to the corner over here with rocks and stuff, so there's more water. So that could come on to Rutherford Green Drive or onto our immediate property so that we would have pools of water there. As we look ahead at the future, there's no way of predicting storms, how much rain we're going to get. And I don't understand, maybe somebody could help me. The water goes in here and it's retained for a certain amount of time. Well, how long and where does it go from there? And then if there is an overflow and another overflow, what is our issue? Been living there for 9 years, and we have, because the elevation goes down from Route 1, we have water coming down on the side of the Waterford Green Drive, and it's eroding everything and stuff, and we've been struggling to figure out a solution just to that. When you raise the elevation here 4 feet, it's already higher. We're already having water come down into number 2. And so that just automatically then makes it, even if it does turn down somewhat, that there's still going to be increased natural water coming off. So the drainage is critical. And also having the possibility of maybe not as many units so that we can really retain the buffer, the privacy, the drainage situation would be really good. I need to kind of talk about the traffic. The traffic, people can assess it, but when you live there and you drive the traffic, it's a little bit different. And so coming out onto Route 1 has been difficult, and in the summer it's really difficult. And you know, with Smoke Barbecue there, they're doing great business. They got a lot of folks, and yet now if we put right next door one more driveway, I'm concerned that somebody will leave the port in, take a right, not look real carefully, and somebody's coming out of their project. Boom. So again, taking a closer look at the traffic, as how all of this is going to work, I think is really a thing that needs to be done before there are any major issues. So the big thing for me and for my husband is the drainage situation, quality of the setback. Please don't reduce it just to 20 feet. Make sure that we have more of a setback of the buffer between what they're doing and the possibility of maybe reducing even the scope of their project, and then looking at the traffic. So I appreciate being able just to share these things with you, and it's only from an experience type of point, but I love living at Waterford Green, and I know that people are going to like living in their places, but we have to come up with a way that's more reasonable, even though it fits all of the codes and restrictions, and they've done a great job putting it all together. But when you look at it, in reality, how is it all going to work?
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Hi, my name's Adam Dobrovich, and I am an abutter over here in the front. I didn't get a chance to see the plan because I couldn't get it on the internet, and I was unable to see it. But right off, you know, this is a great piece of property. It has heritage.
Excuse me, sir, can you please just make sure you're talking to the microphone so I can hear you? Thank you.
It's a great piece of property. I think it has a lot of heritage to the town. You know, and there's a lot of native plants on there, tiger lilies, all kinds of wildflower. You know, the vegetation definitely takes care of a lot of the drainage issues. My property's the lower part of all the properties, so any drainage that's free to run will run to the corner of my backyard, which my yard's not too big, but we do like to, you know, I have kids and they like to run their scooters in the grass. So that, and then where they plan on putting the snow up front is gonna run into my property. Taking out the sidewalk in the front, I've had a 2-foot sidewalk in the front of my house for 20 years, and I really enjoy it. I don't see any reason to take that away because we like to walk down to Dairy Queen on a sidewalk. I think there's too much of it, landscaping in the front that might block out some the view to pull out onto Route 1, which is fast moving. Sorry, I gotta slow down a little bit. So if, you know, Route 1's 50 miles an hour, which it should be 25 again, you know, there's too many plants out front, so they can't see out past the front of their Escalade. If it's gonna be low-income housing, how long are they gonna be able to stay there? If you say 13 days, then how do we know they're gonna leave in 13 days or 30 days? So I think that isn't a great idea. I do want it all fenced in if it should happen, so that they are contained. Yeah, I really would like a fence all the way, you know, just like your 6-acre property, this is my property. So, you know, I think it should be traditional. There was an existing house in the front across from Herb's, so, okay. But if you're gonna put houses up along that road, they should come out of Waterford Road there. That's where the driveway should be. You shouldn't have to put in a accessory road in such a small piece of property to make it, you know, whatever you want. But, so yeah, there's way too many houses, there's too many plants. If you're throwing evergreens and white pines, they're gonna grow 80 feet tall, and you'll have to cut the bottom up and all the light will go through. So, thanks for listening. Doesn't look like much is listening, but, yeah.
Taking notes.
I don't think it's a good idea.
Thank you. Any other comments?
I do have the letter, but I believe it was from Dick and Cindy, who are Unit 2, who already spoke this evening, right? So I don't need to read this. Do you think the letter covered all your points, or you covered all your points when you spoke? I can read it into the record if you want. Okay. The proposal, so this is from Dick and Cindy Flo from 2 Waterford Green. The proposal includes reducing the setback from 50 feet to 20 feet. This will strain the natural drainage system by removing large trees that retain water and reduce runoff. The number of requested units is a negative impact to the natural environment. In addition, raising the elevation level for construction of these units increases the potential of runoff to the west of the property. Number 2, to be constructed drainage and collected system. Where does the water go from the system? If it overflows, the designated areas at the edge of the property will, rockfill could silver flow into Waterford Green itself. The possible increase of large storm in succession would already overflow onto the roadway. Scope of the project, is this too many units? Number 4, protection of existing large trees during construction. We would like to see them fenced so large vehicles do not injure or cut them down. 5, setback fencing. Would like to see an attractive fence between our property and this project. 6, setback landscaping needs to be non-deciduous for a year-round buffer. 7, traffic increase. There's plenty of existing traffic entering and leaving Waterford Green from the owners in the Port Inn. In addition, Smoke Barbecue now adds significant traffic onto Route 1 at the entry point to Waterford Green. It could be assumed that each of the rental units will have 2 cars, thereby creating another potential traffic issue. During the tourist season, there is always congestion. It was stated previously that a traffic study was done. We are interested to know when this was done due to the recent changes on Route 1. 8, we would like to see the legal 50-foot setback to be retained to address the concerns noted above, also increase privacy and the environment to small animals and birds.
Thank you. Yep.
Adam Dobrovich, 63 York Street. I really like development and change and everything else. But if, as I drive around the town and I see these little developments, it's getting a little sloppy. That's what I'd like to say.
Okay. Any other comments? We'll close the public hearing. I'll give you an opportunity to respond to some of those concerns.
Sure. Okay. I'll start from the top. The HOA had a concern about the elevation and drainage coming off our property around the stormwater system. We have designed an extensive detention and infiltration chamber system that's subsurface in order to prevent any increase to stormwater runoff leaving the property. The reason it looks so substantial on this plan is exactly to avoid any of the issues that are of concern. The overflow outlet shown in all of the storms we modeled is never utilized. It is just there in the event of something absolutely huge. So there is not an engineered failure of the system. But in all of the storms that we've modeled, the 2, the 10, the 25, and the 25 is the one that's required of the town, that overflow sees no discharge from it. All of the water is infiltrating. As noted by our neighbor at number 2 Waterford Green Drive, the existing trees are important, and they do help absorb and soak up that water. We have some very good A soils here that have high infiltration rates, and that is where a lot of the volume of water is intended on being directed, is that infiltration. We've been out there with a soil scientist. We've dug holes in the dirt, various places, evaluated where the groundwater table is, what the soil conditions are, to evaluate what kind of infiltration rate we can get. Theoretically, the soils we were seeing in there can get upwards of 60 inches per hour of infiltration. What we've modeled with our stormwater analysis and design is about 2.4 inches of infiltration per hour, as is the standards set by the Department of Environmental Protection. So we've, even in our design, set a extremely conservative limit on how much infiltration we're expecting out of the system, hence the larger quantity of chambers that is intended on detaining it and giving it time to infiltrate without discharging off the property towards the abutter. And that goes with the roof drains and the catch basins as well, in order to capture all that water so the abutter will not see a lot of surface runoff either. Moving on for the landscape buffer concerns, as iterated before, we're trying to provide an extensive buffer within the 20 feet that we are looking to have it reduced to. At our last meeting, we were requested to provide a more extensive buffer and to provide evergreen trees, so it became a 4-season buffer, and we've complied with that in our revision that we're presenting today. I will have to check to see what our proximity is exactly to the closest building on the abutting property and make sure I know what that number is exactly. I have gone out there and I've looked at all the trees and picked them up myself, measured them out, saw how big they are and where exactly they lay in relation to our plan. And with that 20-foot buffer, the majority, nearly all of the large growth on the site is within that proximity. So we're not looking to cut down a lot of these old growth trees that are on site. We would like to retain those and make sure that they stay healthy and are preserved as part of the buffer. No, the interior of site where we are proposing the actual development, there's a lot of young growth stuff because the site had been previously cleared for the previously approved project on the site, which was a large commercial development that all fell within kind of 20-foot setbacks. So kind of in that area, there is not a lot of that old growth, but within the 20-foot buffer that we are looking to maintain, that's where all the existing old growth still remains. Following up on those buffer concerns, the fence line, the fencing to go along was previously proposed as, or previously requested to go along Waterford Green Drive and along the abutting property line with the Waterford Green Condominium Association, where we are amenable to get a fence put in. We can discuss and make sure to look at what the fencing style is in Waterford Green Drive to make sure that that matches appropriately to go along that back fence line. I guess one question I have for the board is the location of that fence. Would that need to stay out of the buffer as well?
No. When you're looking at the grade change that you have and where you're raising the site up, roughly where you're showing it being up higher on the slope, so you're going to get more protection of Unit 2, which sits lower. So having it up on that upper edge near the end of where your circulation is would make the most sense as far as placement.
Okay, great. Yeah, so we'll look to get in that fencing along the property line as requested. That's understandable. The lighting, we have gone through and ensured that these are downcast lighting fixtures and that there is no intrusion onto the abutting properties. The photometric plan, as I discussed earlier, that photometric plan was developed essentially assuming an empty site. So with a completely cleared site, there's no intrusion off the property at any of the property lines. And then if you throw in a 20-foot landscaping buffer to further obstruct it, there's going to be even less than the potential 0 that was already going. Let's see. Going down the list, I believe that's all of the comments presented by the Homeowners Association. The comments presented by the cottages are setbacks. And I believe, looking at my plan here, the corner of the fence to your pool kind of lies right between units 11 and 12 at the very end of the site. That area especially, we have pretty substantial, there's substantial existing vegetation, and we're going to be proposing additional trees to go in there. The area just east of that, kind of running along the property line from there, that area does have some kind of holes in the clearing now that you can visibly see through, and we're proposing trees in our landscaping plan to provide screening to kind of fill that area, make sure that there is a sufficient landscape screen within that space, and make sure that there is a separation between the two properties, like you are requesting. As far as who keeps track of the affordable rentals, that is something that is going to be a covenant deed restriction. So that is going to be legally binding. That needs to be adhered to for the property owner and our client. So they'll make sure that we have 3 affordables, or at least there will be 3 available for affordable, regardless of what. If he fills 9, if he fills 9 with non-affordable, the remaining 3, those are designated for affordable. He cannot rent those to non-affordable criteria. The town has criteria for what is classified as affordable.
Based on income.
Yes.
So you have to, sorry. That's all set out in the town standards, and it's based on the York County, the U.S. Census, and how they designate how much people are earning, and then 30% of that can't be more than 30% going toward housing. So there's a threshold that the government sets as what affordable is for rent and stuff. So. Sorry, no, it's, you can answer, these questions certainly are fine, but it's not really a debating forum, so it's hard. But we can answer all those questions either at the code office or after the meeting or whatever. But it's okay. But it is, we do have standards for that, how affordable is calculated and how it gets measured. And the town keeps an eye on those things as well, so.
Going to the last question regarding the traffic issues. Like what's been reported in our traffic assessment, it is a fairly, or a very low traffic volume that is expected to be generated by the property. It's all rental units. It's all going to be, I mean, it's not short-term rental units, it's long-term. You're going to have people who are coming in, leaving in the morning, coming in and at the end of the day, and maybe going out like once during the day. So.
Again, sorry, we can't, it's not really a forum for I understand your concerns. He's trying to address them as best he can. We hear what you're saying.
Yeah, so the traffic being generated by the property is expected to be low volume, coming in and out, and that's, I mean, that's what's outlined as far as traffic assessments. It, by the sounds of a lot of the comments, it appears that there is a larger standing issue of a traffic evaluation that is desired for Route 1, but that seems above the this site development proposal.
Sorry. No, we understand your concerns, and just let him address it, and then we'll get comments. So thank you.
Yeah. So within what we're able to do, we only have rights to access onto Route 1. So if we are to develop anything, we need a driveway entrance onto Route 1, and the driveway entrance that we have designed is designed to the best of our ability to meet the town requirements. I've gone out personally with the traffic engineer and reviewed site distances and what kind of visibility you have in each direction. It is well sufficient for what the speed limit's supposed to be in the area. And our separation from Waterford Green Drive, based on our assessment, the small reduction we are requesting should not have a negative impact on it, in exchange for retaining some of that. A very nice. I had a nice picture of it, but I can't show it now. But there's a very nice evergreen tree out front of the site that we would certainly like to keep. It's like a 3-trunk, like 30-inch diameter tree. It's very nice. So we'd prefer not to have to shove the driveway over and cut the thing down. Going into the comments provided by Smoke Barbecue, our density is, as I stated, it's within what the town requires at 12. Between the density and the affordability bonus for there. So that's what we've designed to, and we're trying to create living spaces. I mean, we have sizable unit, like they are 2-story, 2-bedroom units. The floor plans are provided as part of the site plan package. So you can see they do have a nice efficient layout, and these same units have been used elsewhere. The architectural style, and they've been very successful for the tenants that have occupied them. You got a nice little deck, you got a front porch, you got a good ground floor. It even has basement space in it. It's been very appealing to occupants. So we'd like to continue providing such a dwelling unit for additional renters. Reiterated again on the traffic on Route 1. I do understand that this is a concern. And then he mentioned that there was a crosswalk promised on Route 1. This is the first I've heard of that, so I guess I'll have to follow up and understand what the intent on that is with kind of that crossing. Going in further to the comments provided by the abutter at number 2 Waterford Green. The existing trees, I agree, are very important. There are a lot of old growth vegetation, and we would like to maintain those. Like I said, I went out there, I measured them all myself, and they're big, they're nice, and they do stay for the most part. I think there might be maybe 1 or 2 smaller ones, like 3 or 4 inch trees that are not within the 20-foot area already. And on top of that, we are looking to plant additional trees to supplement that buffer, get more evergreens in there, get some conifer trees in there as well to mix in and make sure we have a suitable buffer for a good understory to go with the very tall existing vegetation that is there now. To our second point, the 12 units, if it was to reduce down to 10, then there would be no affordable at that point. It would no longer become part of the project. The water outletting from the system, I described that a bit earlier, but the system looks so large here, but it's actually a lot of kind of small, low chambers. That's kind of why the site is actually built up as well in order to design for that. So with the site a little higher, it allows us to place those chambers underneath and get them to infiltrate and detain that water coming through the site and capture it. So there's very little surface runoff that will actually exit onto abutting properties. Really, it should just be like the buffer itself that would be running over. And like you said, all those old trees, that should suck up a lot of that water even. And then traffic problems again. We did measure the site distance and found it to be exceeding the requirement for the speed limit of the road that's through there. And then going into the comments from the abutter at 63 York. I believe you mentioned something about the sidewalk. We don't intend on removing any of the sidewalks. We're actually with the front of the property and that kind of redevelopment and removal of kind of the gravel pad area. Now we would be looking to establish kind of a cleaner sidewalk along Route 1 at the frontage of the property. So you should have a nice sidewalk to walk on to make your way up to Dairy Queen. No, that the waiver for the grass to remove the 2-foot grass strip is only between the parking area and the sidewalk that is in front of units 3 through 12. By the ordinance, they require a small 2-foot strip that would sit between the curb of the parking and the 5-foot sidewalk that provides access or pedestrian access through the development and to each of those units. That 2-foot strip there, we are looking to get that requirement waived in order to provide healthier growing grass and vegetation on the opposite side of the sidewalk. Having a 2-foot strip like that between the curb of the parking lot and the sidewalk, you're going to get a lot of residents trampling it, just going from their car straight to the sidewalk. They're not going to take the time to walk all the way around to the curb or to the curb ramp and come up. They're just going to trample over the grass, and it's not going to have a lot of room to really flourish there. So we would prefer to have it on the opposite side where you're not going to have people trampling over it, and we can provide a bit of more substantial space rather than having a small space on one side and a small space on the other side, and neither of them really do great. So that's that. The site distances, again, we've measured them. They exceed the requirement for the road as it's posted. If there's speeding that seems to be occurring, that may be another concern that needs to be addressed, but I don't believe it's really part of this project per se. The low income housing, this is not transitional housing. It's going to be long-term leases and rentals. It's not any kind of short-term or anything. And as we discussed, that it follows the affordability of it is based on nationwide and other standards that are stated or set by set by like federal census and town definition. Fence along property lines we will certainly we'll certainly entertain the idea of that if it's desired for any of the butters, like the Waterford Green Drive abutter. They appear to desire that, so we're more than happy to comply. If that is of interest elsewhere, and the landscape buffer we're proposing doesn't seem sufficient, or you'd still like a fencing in addition to the buffer, we can certainly discuss. Access from Waterford Green Drive, this was discussed. We don't have the rights to it, and any kind of we don't have the rights to it. We are trying to avoid increasing traffic on Waterford Green Drive, since that traffic seems to be a general concern. And the financial burden of potentially taking on responsibility for maintenance of Waterford Green Drive may prove challenging with kind of the development we're proposing, and making sure we can keep the units affordable and provide what we're looking to provide for housing. And as far as the landscaping goes, at the previous meetings, we were requested to provide more landscaping in order to provide a substantial buffer. So a little bit of a loss at kind of the contradictory too much or too little.
Well,
So
I
if
think
we can
one of
find a
the-
middle ground.
One of the concern, I think, was that it would block sight lines to Route 1. So you guys are cognizant of that and won't be blocking any sight lines.
Yes.
The substantial buffers that you're providing in the landscaping that's higher will be further back from the roads. You're not blocking sight lines down Route 1. So
Yep.
we're clearly aware of that, and we'll make sure that.
Okay. Yeah. The street trees we're providing, they are set back. There is a substantial clear area that will allow for visibility, even with the landscaping plan in place.
Thank you.
I believe that addresses all of the comments I've heard tonight.
All right, board members, I'll give you a chance to follow up. Dan?
Thanks for starting this way.
Yeah, well, I know Bob's got a lot, so I'll let you go first.
All right, so just where to start? Certainly, certainly appreciate everyone's comments and concerns tonight, and believe they're not falling on deaf ears. I just want to look at some of these, again, a little closer in terms of mitigating concerns. The first would be fencing along the 6 parking stalls that point towards 63 York. So to Adam's concerns earlier, I think that's an area that may have been overlooked because based on the proximity and the elevation changes there, those do go directly to that residential property. Similar to Catherine and John's comments, I think there's a 6-foot grade change from the back of the properties to the property line, right? So as you go out to the back where the porches end, will drop down about 6 feet, roughly over a span or a distance.
Yep.
I don't know if there is need or the ability to do any kind of fencing or screening in between the unit clusters. So between 4 and 5, 6 and 7, and so on, because those cars will be going directly towards the cottages in that respect. So if you kind of follow it, where those breaks are between those units, there are parking stalls that extend out through there.
Can I just ask one question? I guess I didn't realize, but
Sorry.
that there was a
If you have a question, I'd ask you to have to come. You can, but just come up here. We don't want to go back and forth a lot, but
You just mentioned that there was a drop, that I guess, is the rain gonna come down like onto our property? I mean,
the elevation.
Go ahead, Chris.
The elevation of their
of the buildings.
of their grade is going to be,
Elevation change.
their elevation is higher than your property is. So there'll be a slope between their building and your property line.
Right, so so we're gonna have more water runoff
no.
than we normally do?
No.
Or is that gonna make a
No,
difference?
they're capturing all the water from the buildings over. The only water that's coming towards you is just on that slope itself.
The water that comes off the roof of these buildings are actually going to fall to the left and right sides of the building. You can see that little purple line along here. These are roof drip lines. So it is not coming off the back of the building. It will be coming between the buildings, captured in these roof drip lines, and then the roof drip lines actually transfer that water this way into the system. So the only water that comes in your direction will be what is within the buffer itself, where we can't put any other kind of devices or anything to stop the water. And that should be vegetated and be pretty low runoff as well.
And that slope exists to a degree currently, so it's not changing essentially what is there. It's just recognizing the fact that when cars pull into those units, their lights will pass through, especially where there's a break between units.
Yep.
And making sure there's a block to that.
Yeah. And actually to speak to that, we do have vegetation shown kind of filling that space between the units both at the front of the building where we have lights, we have some low vegetation that kind of will help obstruct it at that end, but also there is additional vegetation at the back of the units that should, if any light gets past the first thing, it's going to run right into the second one. And
and it's
should
just
not
making
get
sure
its
that
way
we
out.
call that out as, some of the unintended consequences of development is to make sure that you're looking at some of those things.
Yep.
And for the most part, the topography is what it is, other than where the units are going to be constructed. And even that there's a considerable slope going down the side of 63 out of your property down your back, right? So all that is there already. It kind of already exists today. And then the last concern is just the extension of that fence line and blockage to Waterford Green, as Janice mentioned earlier, and I think you referenced. So just some additional considerations based on the feedback from the town tonight. I know the other board members are going to have some more specific questions, but I just wanted to call those out.
Thanks, Dan. Janice?
Here we are. I don't think I really have much more. I think Dan just pretty much summarized everything up that I was going to say. Thank you.
Bob?
Oh, boy. Where to start? Okay. Why don't we just sit with the vegetation? First off, the planting that you're talking about that may block the light coming through the buildings, not a chance. They're not going to do anything, okay? Your grade change between where the headlights are going to be shining through there and to the lower reaches of the cottage site, the cottages, you get about a 7-foot grade change. So you're going to have a headlight sitting up here that's going to be looking into the windows of wherever the cottage is. And I think we need to show that as well when I ask you for Unit 2 on Waterford. We should have an understanding of where those buildings are in relationship to the proposed program and where parking is and lighting, so that can be clarified. The vegetation along that line that's being planted, the height of the material is such that it's going to be a while before it ever gets up to the height that will ultimately block some of the light that may come through the middle of those two buildings. Overall, it's pinpoint channels of light. The buildings are going to block most of it, so, but those are areas that need to be looked at. The vegetation up front, to Janice's point, you're really not doing anything. The material is irrelevant in terms of what it's doing to enhance that. Well, it's It's not necessarily required by what we're looking at. I think for an overall aesthetic improvement, the applicant may want to take a look at doing something that's a little more tasteful across the front than other than just grass between the sidewalk.
Sure.
The sidewalk issue and vehicles overhanging, I know the standard has always been 5 feet. With vehicles today, regardless of whether it's a GMC pickup truck like mine and someone else I know, you may extend across that, but even my wife has a SUV that I know if she parked up against the curb, it would be probably about 10 inches to 12 inches over the curb line. So my rule of thumb is you go with a 6-foot sidewalk where you've got parking that's going to drive up against it. Okay, even that still doesn't get you a full width, but it gets you at least a little bit more room to navigate through. Okay. Lighting, your photometric plan, I'm surprised because I know I use Swaney lighting to do my stuff as well on my projects, and it does not reflect the foot candle of those pole lights. It's just concentrating on what's in the parking lot. The type fixture, there is a backflush of light that comes off of those, even though they're full cutoff. We should see the foot candle illumination levels that go beyond the backside of that, as well as it's unclear whether or not the photometric output for the wall pack units you're proposing on the back of the units and the front of the units, that the lighting is being calculated for that. And with the lighting on the back of the units adjacent to Mr. Dobrovich, geez, I got it right. I wasn't sure I'd do that. And for the cottages, again, you're going to be of an elevation higher, okay? So what's going to happen is you're going to have a projection of someone being on the lower portions of the site looking up towards those light fixtures. So we're going to need to have a full understanding of where the light output is for those fixtures in relationship to the planting along the edge to certify it's going to actually do some screening of the light, okay? Stormwater question. It does look like a substantial size design, and you said that your modeling says it doesn't look like it would even overflow. You've designed it to a 25-year storm, which is what's required.
Right.
I guess my question to you is you sounded like being very conservative, that it's almost a little bit over-designed, greater than a 25-year storm event? Any idea what that threshold may be? And the only reason I ask that is we all know what storm events have been like over the last 10 years. And the 25-year storm event is like what a 10-year storm is like.
Yep. I have not run larger storm event models for this. I could definitely take a look at it and try to understand. When I say over-designed, it's into kind of the infiltration that is possible, taking a tenth or less of what may be possible out there. So I have to believe that it would fare well in larger storms. I don't have the supporting model available to me tonight to support that.
I didn't think you necessarily would, but it's just when you made those comments about being conservative that it would not. And we've heard tonight that Waterford Green, they've got legitimate concerns over there. We've heard the concerns before with what's come off of Chamberlain on another project on the other side of the road that had been coming before the board. So there is a legitimate concern in terms of any water coming off of here. And, so just want to, the board's perspective, I think we obviously need to look at what the public health, safety, and welfare is, and the neighbors are part of that process that we need to be cognizant of, that we're not creating problems that are going to come down the line.
Yeah, we definitely made sure to take an extensive look at the drainage and making sure we're evaluating the site conditions appropriately in order to model that correctly.
Okay, good. Traffic, I went through Mr. Bray's analysis of this, which basically is using the ITE standards, and went out and looked at the site distance and whatnot. And it's a baseline traffic letter report. It does not take into effect any counts, which we didn't ask you to do a full-blown traffic assessment. I do know that trying to come out of Waterford Green Drive at times can be a challenge in the off-season. In the summer months, it's even exponential, okay? And with smoke, and I'm glad to see that they're doing well enough, they seem to be busy. it becomes a safety factor that while what Bill has stated in his report, the trip generation off of this is not that significant, it is when you start adding to what's going on in that area, okay? To which then I'll throw over to Mr. Osterreiter the question about whether or not the discussion about a crosswalk. Can you kind of enlighten us a little bit on that?
I think Mr. Maynard might be confusing a conversation he may have had with Brian LaVerriere, and Brian and I spoke about this. I think the concern isn't, it's a couple concerns. The posted speed versus the operating speed. 35 miles an hour is eligible for a crosswalk, but you want to have it at a clear, safe landing zone, and the spot he's talking about does not exactly add up, and also connecting to a network. If we were to locate a crosswalk out there, I think that is a type that we would use, one of the rapid rectangular flashing beacons like you see on Fletcher Street. Again, there's also looking at other crosswalks in the area. DOT's crosswalk policy typically doesn't like you to have them more than 400 feet away because people aren't going to walk that far. So this is an area that's starting to see more growth, more activity, and then it's up to us to sort of look at that pedestrian network and see how it's really going to be consistent with it on that way. So I'm not suggesting that a crosswalk doesn't have a need there. It's really where it goes and when it goes in. And this will start to contribute to it, but I don't think just putting pavement or paint on the pavement is the answer right now. We got to look at all of those uses in that area. One of the things that's a challenge with this is access management is really what dictates. Traffic is about gaps, it's about capacity, and all of these driveways create, the closer the driveways are together, the less gaps you have. So the delay is there, becomes more problematic, and while it may not seem to be as great a situation to put more traffic on Waterford Green, when you keep distributing it, it's harder to manage traffic with traffic lights when it's all spread out too. So if you look at what's on that street for volume, seasonally, it's much different this time of year versus off years. I do not think what's being proposed here is as problematic as it sounds. It's just, you know, what you have is operationally, it's not great in the summertime, and that's not going to change or significantly be impacted by these smaller types of projects. But the answer about the crosswalk, I know Brian had asked me about that a year ago. That's something we haven't really said no to, we're just not saying yes to right now. I don't think that's intended to burden this applicant because of it, though.
I just want to make sure we got all the details out since it was mentioned, so, okay. Let's see. I guess when it comes down to the buffer in terms of us as a board determining that the 20-foot wide buffer is acceptable, approvable, I think one of the biggest components of this comes in, and I've experienced in just a couple of years being on this board, where plantings have been done, and for one reason or another, once it leaves us or even the site review board, stuff dies, owners decide to cut something down, and then there's no recognition on that. So I guess I would entertain, that I'm proposing as an entertainment for this board to consider, is that a formalized condition of approval would be encountered with that waiver request that would require essentially in perpetuity that the owner / future owners, assigns, what have you, are responsible for the perpetual maintenance and maintaining that buffer around this property where the 20-foot buffer reduction would occur. So that is one thing I would suggest strongly to the board, that we put that on there so that that is on the recorded plan that goes into the registry ultimately, so that it's, once this board is no longer here and our planner and our community development / town engineer / jack of all trades is retired, you know, and somebody comes back and says, wait a minute, the buffer's gone. There's at least a legal trail that identifies who the responsibility is to maintain that.
Yes, I do agree with your sentiment there to make sure that this buffer is held in perpetuity and it's maintained and upkept in the manner that it is intended to be. It's of great discussion and great importance to everyone involved here, both my client, myself, and all of the abutting parties, so that's completely understandable.
Another question regarding the buffer is with the grade changes along the boundary with Unit 2. How much, it was kind of tough, there's so much graphics going on here with the trees and the grading plan, trying to figure out exactly how much fill around the trees that are to remain is going to happen, if is filling going to occur around those tree trunks? And then also that goes part and part with that excavation that's going to wind up being done as part of the grading plan that would impact the roots. So that's another factor that needs to be considered, so.
So I believe specifically along that line, and actually I think all of the landscaping we're showing, it has been taken into account, and it has been recognized that making sure we're not proposing to keep a tree that's got 6 feet of fill around it. It's just not going to work. I think the majority of trees shown along that western property, or that western buffer, that's where the grade meets back to existing. So it should be tying in right at the foot of those trees or nearly, so you're not getting a lot of that overfill on top of the existing trees. And I believe the same could be said about really all the other landscaping around it. Try to be very conscious of that.
This is the one thing you'd have to take into consideration if this is where the tree root line is and your fill is here. That's the trunk, the root zone's out here at the width of the canopy. So what you need to be cognizant of, that you're not winding up disturbing through excavation. The fill's not so much an issue, it's really around the trunk where it really becomes the biggest problem. But if you start excavating the root system, you're gonna start damaging those trees. So you need to be cognizant of what's going on in those locations.
Yeah, we'll be sure to be vigilant about the existing vegetation and making sure to preserve that and protect it, especially during construction where it's most vulnerable.
To Bob's point too, you want to make sure that you're not within 10 feet of the property line there. It looks like you might be like 6 or 7 feet, so that might just have to be updated on that side. Excuse me.
Which side?
The south side?
Cottage side?
Yep.
I'll make sure of that.
Yep.
Let's see. Planting. One, there's a couple of plants in there that, the arborvitae, I just know from experience, as I said, my mother lives about a stone's throw away from this. And there's deer in this neighborhood, and deer just love arborvitae. So I would suggest you to find something else that would be a more suitable plant, or you're gonna have a client who's gonna be out replacing trees more often than he wants to, or she wants to. And in terms of the height of some of these things, I think you really need to, because of the grade change, you're gonna need to be looking at something that's gonna be taller than the 5 to 6 foot range of some of these that you're proposing. Because where they're gonna be planted, they're gonna be below the edge of your deck, so they're really not gonna be providing an awful lot of screening really along the Mr. Dabrowski's property, the cottages, and then Unit 2. And obviously, some of the discussion along Waterford Green Drive, where you've flipped the layout out around so that the buffering along that side isn't quite as, for fence, they're concerned, seems to be fairly okay. In addition to the comment that Dan raised about the uncurbed parking areas when you first come in between York Street and Unit 3, I don't remember just how dense the vegetation is there that you're preserving in terms of how much of a buffer that, in screening the makeup of that vegetation, whether or not that's going to screen headlights, during the winter months. If not, I think you probably definitely, whether it is the fence or doing a little denser evergreen screen in that area to cut down any light going in his yard.
Yeah, we'll definitely look to increase the screening around that parking area, and what kind of light pollution may bleed off from headlights and whatever through there.
I guess one other, just kind of picking up Janice's comment in the beginning with the walkway going down to the trash units. except for those 2 units, I'm not sure anybody is going to walk down the sidewalk and over to the trash units. They're probably going to walk out their front door and take the shortest distance, shoot 2 points, which is a straight line. So I'm not so overly concerned about a sidewalk being along that side. And to your point, it does add that much more impervious cover, but I just wanted to weigh in on that. And then my standard peeve, which I don't know as I really paid attention to the subdivision plan, but you should have on the, your subdivision plan should have a list of all the drawings and detail sheets that are part of the approved drawings with the correct dates on them, okay?
Yep.
And all the, whatever waivers wind up being granted by the board, that needs to be on that plan.
I believe I have a drawing list and I have a list of waivers. I will make sure it is correct for whatever set is being utilized for, whatever set's being signed and recorded.
It was just a couple of comments.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Just thank you.
I just wanted to note that you plan to rent those out, but if there is ever a change in ownership to a, I guess what I want to say is that if you change the type of ownership of these units to anything but a single common owner, you then will have to obviously designate units to be affordable. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Versus being floating. So
Yep.
I think we probably should put a note on the plan somewhere to that regard. If there's, I don't know, 'cause I don't think a change of ownership comes back to this board. So I think we need to put a note on the plan to make sure if there's a change of ownership from a single common owner to any other ownership type, that we need to designate affordable units need to be designated.
Is that something that would go on the plan, or is that something that would want to be incorporated into that restrictive covenant with the affordable?
Both.
Both.
Great.
I think too that before, depending on if there's a lot of items discussed tonight, so I'm not sure if the board wants to continue the public hearing or how they want to handle all the items with lighting and fencing, and if they would like to see this again, considering there are a lot of abutters that are invested in the project, there should be a better fleshing out of just that affordability, how much they're going to charge for rent, those types of things included in the next submittal as well, to make sure those affordable units are meeting the criteria, which we would usually see at a final plan as well, so.
Right, so we could either continue this one, or we could just have another public hearing.
We could either continue this, or you're right, you could have one at final. Typically, once we've gone through preliminary plan approval, it's usually just a few i's and a couple of t's crossed. For final, we don't usually have a public hearing.
Yeah.
I would say that if, the documentation with the items we've discussed tonight is provided and the board listens to it and reviews it at whenever the next time we review this, if we're comfortable enough that we've responded to the issues and concerns that have been expressed to us by the abutters and by our own concerns, then we could move it on to final. It wouldn't necessarily have to have another public hearing. But if it's questionable, that we're not 100% comfortable, that we've had the abutters' concerns addressed, then we can decide at that point to schedule for a public hearing.
All right, well, I guess the question then will be, do we think we have enough information to act on a preliminary plan? I think there's probably enough outstanding items that we're not ready to do that yet. So I think we'll have another preliminary plan review. In which case we'll just continue the public hearing until our next meeting, next review of this project, which will be another preliminary plan review.
Continuation of it.
Continuation. Are you,
So if you want to continue the public hearing, you would do a date certain to continue the public hearing too, so you wouldn't have to renotice, and continue the preliminary review with all the revisions you requested this evening. What Bob was saying is that if you think this is complete enough that you can, when you go to you'd close this essentially. When you go to final, if things were not submitted or submitted, you could then vote to have another public hearing then instead of doing a final review.
I guess what I'm saying is I don't think we're ready to
Okay.
act on a preliminary plan tonight.
So we can either continue it to a date certain, or you could close the public hearing and renotice as another preliminary plan if you want to, because this is their public hearing.
Because part of that question would be to the applicant.
Yeah.
Timing to be able to address the concerns that have been raised tonight in order to try to establish what that date certain would be for continuing the hearing. So, just threw you under the bus. How much time do you need?
So I guess the question is, you would be looking to have everything noted here addressed and resubmitted for an additional public hearing, or
Continuation of the same
just a
hearing.
continuation of this hearing?
Brittany, you need the stuff. How many days prior to a meeting?
So if you're looking at the meeting on the 24th, I would essentially probably need that next Friday, the 7th. So that gives you 2 weeks-ish. If you're looking at being on May 8th, I'd probably need stuff by, hold on, I'm going over 2 different dates.
Yeah, 2 weeks should be sufficient amount of time to manage the comments we've heard tonight.
So you want to stay on the 24th?
Yes.
We will continue this public hearing until April 24th, at which point we'll continue our review of the preliminary plan. And at that meeting, if our items will be addressed, we can act on the preliminary plan and address any waiver requests at that point. Anything else? Yes.
Yeah, Chris, just one more comment too. Something that Bob referenced earlier in the night, getting a better view of the western boundary and Unit 2. My mapping shows somewhere tree line to tree line about 60 feet plus or minus. If we could just get a little bit more exacting
Yeah,
scope of that, as well as kind of what that, if technology worked, we'd have photos, right? You were promising us
Yeah,
photos. Just a sense of what that tree line is, maybe looking from Unit 2 back up towards the property, just so we understand the density.
I got some nice photos right in my bag.
Yeah.
It's on a little hard drive that would go in there.
And as well as the cottages and the proximity to those, so.
Yeah,
you
I
actually heard
will,
that.
I'll have some figures prepared for that. I will get the additional sketch that shows our proximity to the abutting properties and structures, so we know what those measurements are as requested.
For those of you in attendance tonight, you will not receive a notice in the mail. This is your notice that the meeting is being continued, just to give you a heads up.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Yes, thank you all for coming. We'll continue our review on April 24th. Yes, thank you. She was just- This board still has a little bit more business to do, so Only thing left we need to do is to review the minutes of our previous meeting. Reviewing minutes of Monday, March 13th, 2023. Anybody have corrections to make? If there's a yes, then I'll go through.
Page 2, this is be under the transitional zones. Just this 4-sentence down, it should be planning board, rather than just the planning.
Any other comments or corrections? Good. Well, what are you on page 5?
Yeah, real minor, just Edward Koritko, it's just reverse the R and A. That's first in his name.
Where are you, Janice? Sorry.
Third paragraph down, Edward
Page
Koritko.
5.
Just reverse the 2 letters of his name. I think that's correct.
I can confirm that too.
Anybody else have comments or corrections for the minutes?
Just clarification. Page 3, second paragraph after density provisions. After discussion, town council agreed to retain a provision for affordable housing units between 25 and 50. I thought it was below 50.
I'm pretty sure it's between 25 and 50, but I can confirm that.
Maybe I'm just confusing it with the parking that we had talked about, so.
Yeah, the provision that exists now is
25 to 50.
Yeah.
25
okay.
and over, and so,
Well, there's one for 25 to 50 and 50 and over.
right.
Yep.
All right, is there a motion?
Like a motion to accept the planning board meeting minutes for March 13th, 2023 as amended.
Motion been made and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? None. All right, the minutes are approved as corrected. Did I sign this? Or do you? No.
They haven't fixed that clock update.
Is that last page clean?
Yeah,
There was corrections on page 5.
I've got 6 pages on mine.
Yeah, but,
Oh, I
so
see.
5 and 6 is double-sided, so you can't sign it, unfortunately. But you can sign these.
Okay, fine.
Press
Any
those
other business for us? Do you have anything else for us?
I don't think so.
Yeah, we're gonna stay and
Oh,
sign those
yes, you have to
plans.
sign the plans back there.
Yep.
Sign the minutes. I only have one application on the next meeting. It's the first wetland mitigation application for Jeffries Way for wetland fill that's over 500 square feet, so.
Awesome. We
We'll have
recover some of our
a
time.
shorter meeting for once in a little bit, so.
Don't jinx us.
Well, yeah, knock on wood.
All right,
You know, you never say that.
yeah.
I know. You don't use the Q word in the code office, especially when there's a full moon. Yep.
Like, don't jinx a perfect game. Okay.
Motion to adjourn.
Yeah, go ahead.
I second the motion.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. All right. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.